Okay, ladies and gents, good evening, good day. This is Splendid Isolation number 6, and the thumbnail for today is a picture called Well Done, Condor. And Condor, HMS Condor, was a gunboat at the bombardment of Alexandria in 1882, but closed in very close to an Egyptian battery and silenced it. Hence, Well Done, Condor. And I'm going to do what I usually do and play us a bit of a musical intro. So, where are we?
Time to do and dare, Dolly Gray. Don't you hear the tramp of feet, Dolly Gray, sounding through the village street, Dolly Gray? 'Tis the tramp of soldiers' feet in their uniform so neat. So goodbye until we meet, Dolly Gray. Goodbye, darling, I must leave you, though it breaks my heart to go. Something tells me I am needed at the front to fight the foe. See, the soldier boys are marching, and I can no longer stay. Hark, I hear the bugle calling, goodbye, Dolly Gray. Goodbye, Dolly, I must leave you, though it breaks my heart to go. Something tells me I am needed at the front to fight the foe. See, the soldier boys are marching, and I can no longer stay. Hark, I hear the bugle calling, goodbye, Dolly Gray.
Okay, and that was Goodbye, Dolly Gray. Incidentally, interestingly enough, Goodbye, Dolly Gray originally became popular with the Americans for the Spanish-American War and the Brits, which was in 1898, and the Brits adopted it for the Anglo-Boer War in 1899. Hence why there were some pictures of some American soldiers in the video there. So, okay, ladies and gents, we've got a guest with us tonight, Armin, who is a Canadian chap. People who've been following my streams will know that I am keen to get more Canadians, Australians, and New Zealanders onto the stream. So, good day, Armin.
Hey, nice to be here.
And what do we want to start talking about, Adam and Sojo?
Gosh, I'm trying to think of something to include our Canadian guest. But I have to be honest. What I've been following this week has been pretty much what's happening with the financial revolution in GameStop. I don't know if you've been following that, Duke, at all.
Yeah, I've been watching that, and I think that's fine because, I mean, that affects everybody. It's not just a UK issue. That's something that would affect people in Canada and down here in Australia as well. So, yeah, by all means, give us your views on that.
Well, it strikes me as being sort of the, what was it called? Occupy Wall Street version 2.0.
Yeah.
That's gone from existing in a physical realm, which really didn't achieve anything, to taking it to a meme sort of mimetic level online with a bunch of Reddit nerds, and they've effectively created their own hedge fund, and they are sticking it to the sort of mainstream hedge funds, and it strikes me as being a kind of popular revolt against the elites. So it's interesting that this kind of populism that almost seemed like it was going to fade out with Trump being defeated in the presidential election. It seems like we've almost got another new lease of life, and I find it very interesting that that we would see this kind of rebellion. In many ways, I wasn't expecting it at all. It's sort of completely come out of nowhere. But it's certainly put a cat amongst the pigeons with the elite and these financial oligarchs. And it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out on Monday. So those are my thoughts.
Have they lifted the suspension on trading of GameStop shares?
Well, it depends on which brokerage you look at, but many brokers stopped dealing in GameStop, and it wasn't just Robinhood, but it was a whole bunch of brokers. Even a broker that I use. So I've been using a firm called Interactive Brokers for going on 15 years now. They've been a very good firm. They're very highly recommended and rate quite highly for retail investors. But even they put limits on trading in GameStop and AMC and whatnot. But there appears to be more of a story there, in a sense that there is actually some kind of systemic risk in the financial system, as opposed to it being sort of collusion between the brokers to save the hedge funds. There's a very good tweet thread by a guy called System 428 who explains a sort of in-depth esoteric plumbing of the financial system, and there's a lot of sort of third-party risk involved between the clearinghouses and the brokers. So it may not necessarily be a sort of conspiracy in the way that it's being played in the media and on Twitter and on Reddit. But I really can't take my eyes off of it because it's so interesting.
The headlines.
Following this? Sorry, I was just going to say, Armin and Adam, have you been following this, guys?
Well, I mean, I don't know much about stock trading, but I know the headlines have been very interesting. A few alluding to it being anti-Semitic, and then some others saying that the amateur traders were, I think the New York Times said they were bored, and they used a few other derogatory terms. Oh, greedy and bored. And I remember someone that shared that was saying, well, isn't that just what normal traders are too? It was kind of ironic that they made these amateur traders off to be these traits when essentially every other trader would have similar traits in a sense. So it's been interesting seeing like the headlines and how the media is reacting to it.
What about you, Adam? What's your view on this stuff?
I don't know. I kind of feel a bit silly that I missed out on it. Although I'm usually quite defensive on this sort of stuff, so I'd probably bail out a bit early. I do kind of worry about how it's going to end. I mean, a lot of these people are saying, "Oh, look, these people are out for blood. They don't care about the money," and that's kind of useful in its own way. But I think as soon as you start taking emotion into any trade, you're kind of screwing yourself or your group over in the long term. I mean, the thing is, what they're doing here is they're massively overvaluing the share. Like it wasn't undervalued to begin with. They're just now massively overvaluating it. And the problem is that someone's going to be left holding that I don't know if the term hot potato or hand grenade, which one's better, but someone's going to be left holding that at the end.
Yeah.
Holding the bag.
Yeah.
And
And
I was watching somebody's take on this, and what they were suggesting was that the short traders who were originally trying to do the stuff on GameStop were trying to undervalue the shares, like make them lower than they really should be. And of course, then the Reddit thing has actually pushed them, as you say, way up above what they should be now. And the happy medium is actually somewhere in between. But I'm by no means a financial expert, I'm quite sure that you and Sojo, for example, would know much more about it than I do.
Well, Sojo could probably comment on this a lot more than I could, but generally, as far as I'm aware, shorting anything will always lead to it being undervalued.
Mhm.
In the same way that, you know, any big market mover, like any of the big hedge funds or any of the big investment firms, if they make a move, there's a lot of people that just copy them. I mean, this was kind of what happened to the pound in '92, essentially. So I don't know. I don't know how this is going to end, to be fair.
Yeah, that's true. That the position that I think it's called Citron Research, the guy with Andrew left. I think all of their positions were made public, and he made a couple of YouTube videos where he said, you know, basically, yeah, you guys have beaten us. We're out of the market now. But as it stands, there's still tremendous short interest in the stock. So yeah, I think you're right that ultimately someone's going to get left holding the bag, and they're going to get wiped out, and it probably will be the Reddit traders. But
Yeah.
they've sent such a message to to these hedge funds, because really what they have done is that they've essentially created their own hedge fund. It's kind of like a distributed, decentralized hedge fund with millions of participants that are sort of ganging up and operating in concert with one another on the Reddit boards, and this is this isn't the way it's meant to be. And they're actually putting some hedge funds into tremendous difficulty. So it's just a very interesting development in my mind that who would have thought that memes would have gone from sort of shit posting to actually taking out and putting hedge funds into potential sort of insolvency problems. So
It'll be interesting to see what the authorities and the people who run the stock market try and do about this. I think, to me, that's the most interesting thing is how will they try and stop this, because they will try and stop it, I'm quite sure.
yeah, well, a lot of the narrative at the minute is about quote unquote protecting investors.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say, but there's a lot of chatter at the minute about the need to protect retail investors, and I think that ultimately will lead to what the ultimate consequence of that will be, to have restrictions on the kind of leverage they can take, the kind of instruments they can trade. Should a retail investor be able to trade an option? Should they be able to trade futures? All of these kind of things. So that seems to me to be a temporary narrative, but whether that will actually manifest into anything, I don't know. It depends what kind of chaos this creates for the financial system. But I think for me, that's one of the most interesting points, that there is potentially a group of sort of nihilistic Redditors who could potentially bring down the financial system. I think that is very noteworthy and very interesting to watch.
I don't think the financial system is as stable as the financial system would like us to believe it is. Put it that way. I think we saw that in 2008, for one thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you, I don't know if you've looked at Reddit. I mean, I tried to read some of the Reddit conversations, and I have to say, I don't think it's a very good website. It's very hard to read. It's very slow. There's a tremendous amount of shit posting. I find it to be even worse than Twitter. But I've just looked at some of the sort of the highlights of what they've been talking about, and really they've got this. One of the memes is YOLO. You only live once, and they're talking about taking their stimulus checks and just betting it on the ranch, because they basically don't feel like that they've got much of a future. I saw one Reddit post where the guy said that we know that we're not going to retire. What does it matter if I lose this $600? I literally don't give a shit. So it's really just a manifestation of all of the insecurities of the economic crisis that we currently face, actually manifesting itself in a way that's actually affecting, the bigwigs in society.
Well, I mean, this comes on to the whole Great Reset thing, doesn't it? Because part of the reason for that, I mean, I'm not going to say that the Great Reset is a conspiracy theory at this stage, because like governments themselves, including Johnson in the UK, Justin Trudeau in Canada, Biden in America, are talking about Build Back Better and all this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And what people are saying about the Great Reset is one of the things that's driving it is the fact that, excuse me, pensions are just not payable in Western countries anymore because of the very low birth rates, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of these pension companies, these pension funds, are based on sort of embedded obligations to, they need to be making sort of 6 to 8% in the market, and you have to think to yourself, in an environment where sort of risk-free government debt is yielding 0.1%, even negative in some circumstances. How is it possible that these companies and these funds can ever possibly meet their obligations? I think it should be clear to everybody that in the current environment, it's not possible.
Armin, can I just ask you, mate, when you're not talking, can you just mute yourself so we can't hear your fan? Just
Sorry,
that's fine, man. That's fine. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that stuff. It's interesting. It really is. Could I ask Adam, because you're the only guy in the UK who's on here at the moment, since Brutus hasn't showed up yet. Did the reopening protests go at all well in the UK today, or was it covered at all on the mainstream media, that kind of thing?
I don't know. I haven't seen any coverage, but I don't watch the news, so.
Yeah, I mean, ditto. I don't either, unless there's something I specifically want to look at. But I know today was supposed to be the great reopening protest in the UK. But perhaps we'll ask Brutus when he comes on if he's seen anything about it. Sojo, have you seen anything about that? I know, or are you still in the UK at the moment?
I'm still in the UK, but I haven't even heard of what this excuse me. I've not even heard of the reopening process. Can you fill me in on what it is and what it's going to be?
It was a protest. There were quite a lot of videos put up about it last week, whereby they were trying to get British businesses to just reopen, regardless of the arbitrary restrictions that the Alexander Boris Johnson government have put upon them. I was just interested to see how well it went. I mean, like I said, I'm pretty sure that the mainstream media won't cover it, even if it goes quite well. But
I see. You're right.
Yeah.
Well, I find that to be an interesting one because, funnily enough, all of the restaurants where I live at the moment are actually open, but they're just simply doing takeaways. So they have in some way adapted to the work that they're doing. And I even noticed that the charity shop was open. It was just simply a case that they wouldn't let anybody in the shop. But if you wanted to buy something,
Yeah.
they would essentially take your order at the door. They would go and look for the item in the shop, and then they would bring it to the front door. So it's a bit of a funny one. It seems like these businesses can trade, but you don't have the freedom to go in the shops and do the kind of browsing that you would have done. But if I want to buy something from the local hardware store, I still can. It's just it's almost like a kind of click and collect service in a way.
I know that the based Welshman who puts videos out on YouTube that are quite worth watching. He's just put out a video which I'm going to put up on Minds after the show, where a guy who actually feeds homeless people in the UK has been arrested by the police for feeding homeless people. That's the ridiculous situation that we're in at the moment.
Yeah, that's what was the guy arrested for?
Well, he was feeding homeless people, but because he was feeding homeless people, there were more than two people there at once.
Right.
It's just
and of course
it's
not essential travel, I suppose, as well. Yeah.
No, I mean, homeless people should just die of starvation, don't you think? Jesus Christ. And of course, the homeless people he was feeding were mainly sort of white actual Brits and probably some ex-servicemen, as is generally the case. So, you know.
I think in Quebec there's a similar issue with homeless people, but for them it has to do with the curfew in that province because it's either 8 or 9 p.m. You can't be outside, and since homeless people have nowhere to go, a lot have been getting arrested. So and the homeless shelters are stuffed, so they can't even fit all of them. So there's literally no place for them to go.
And of course, the damn sight colder in many parts of Canada than it would be even in the UK in the winter.
Yeah, for sure. Even in the cities, it's pretty cold. You get a lot of wind chill in the cities because like the roads in downtown areas just tunnel the wind down, basically. So I could imagine it's pretty cold in places like Montreal and Quebec City.
I know that Justin Trudeau has certainly been one of these people who's been making a great deal of fuss about Build Back Better and trying to totally change the kind of financial system, etc., that we're living under. What's your views on that stuff, Armin?
Well, I mean, other than him just being a generally depressing figure to read about, what I do know is he gave a lot of funding to Bell, despite the fact that they've been laying off a lot of employees. And the goal, I guess, is like, oh, if they have the money, then they'll be able to pay their employees. But actually, they just laid off a bunch and made profits off of the government funding. So that's been quite nice, I suppose. Not. Yeah, it's just a mess.
Yeah, pretty much the same in Australia and in the UK. Australia actually is not quite so bad. What happened in Australia is like the worst kind of forced lockdowns and things were in the state I live in, which is Victoria, purely because Dan Andrews, dictator Dan as he is known to most of us, he came up with actually the worst lockdowns in the whole of the Western world for months and months and months. And his excuse for doing that was that his hotel quarantines for people coming back to Australia were a mess, because what most Australian states did was they used the local cops and also the Australian Defence Force, the Australian military, offered personnel to do this. And Victoria alone of all the states refused that and used private security companies. And I'm not suggesting for a moment that they were Dan Andrews' Labour Party mates running those private security companies and getting like $3 million contracts for 30 days work. I'm not suggesting that, of course not. But that's apparently what happened. And a lot of people, like there were private security guys having sex with women under lockdown and all this kind of stuff. And unsurprisingly, quite a lot of people supposedly caught coronavirus as a result of that. And it got it from there into Victorian old people's homes and killed quite a lot of very old people who would probably have been dead within 6 months anyway. But there we go. But yeah. So Australia is not quite so bad, but I mean, UK, I'm just like, there doesn't seem to be any ending to it. And I noticed that the latest thing that's coming out now is they are now starting in China, but I'm sure it will come to the West. They are now suggesting that you need anal swabs for this checking if you have coronavirus. So I'm sure you guys can all look forward to having anal swabs. It's getting ridiculous.
Yeah, I would be very surprised if that was going to happen. I think that would that's just off the cards for most Europeans. The Chinese, well, I mean, just look at the things that they eat, that they don't have any qualms about these kind of things. But you know, the idea of sort of like mass anal swabs for people, I mean, although it's, you know, it's funny, I just don't see that happening. I really don't. It's just no one. I mean, no one in the government is going to suggest that. It's just too taboo.
Yeah, even in America, I could just imagine that would honestly create just another Capitol riot with boomers being very pissed off at that. I could just imagine how the sort of evangelicals of America would react to such a thing. That would be mass rioting if they forced that through.
Have you also seen, guys, that they're now saying you should wear multiple masks, not just one, but 2 or 3? And what they're basically doing is admitting that masks don't work. So they're now saying use 2 or 3 because somehow that will make things better.
I haven't heard
yeah, you know what? I saw somebody tweet that, but I've not actually seen any news sources bring that up. So I am admittedly a little bit skeptical about that. I think that seems to be a bit of hyperbole, really.
No, I've actually seen certainly I've seen one American source and one from somewhere else, and I can't remember what the other one was. It wasn't China though, but I've certainly seen two like news reports about it. So yeah, I just think it's ridiculous. I mean, masks don't work for viruses; they're too small. So I think it's about compliance. I think wearing a mask is about showing people that you're complying. Like I thought this the other day. I was at a shopping centre. Like I moved a couple of weeks ago, so I'm now outside of central Melbourne. And I went to a shopping centre I'd never been to before. And I was astonished to find I was one of about 3 people who weren't wearing a mask in the shopping centre. Like not in the shop, just in the shopping centre.
that wouldn't happen in Canada. I remember over the summertime I was in downtown Toronto. At that point, they had stuff open, and I was in one of the malls, and everyone had to wear masks. So I'm surprised to hear that you had that option in Australia. I'm surprised to hear that.
I was asked in one shop by a Chinese lady, surprisingly enough, why wasn't I wearing a mask? And I said, well, I'm exempt, which I am. Yeah, there's that. I mean, they have to exempt you if you're more likely to die from wearing one than not wearing one.
Oh, okay. Actually, I have a question for Armin, because I really don't know a great deal about the sort of coronavirus efforts in Canada. Can you briefly explain what kind of restrictions you have? Do you have a full lockdown like we do in the UK, or is it more like the US? Do the individual states have the power to set these things themselves? How does it work there, and what's the current situation?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, Quebec has right now a curfew, I think at 9 p.m. or something around there. Ontario doesn't have that. So there is definitely provincial differences with standards, Quebec probably being the most strict right now. I know in Nunavut, which is like our Inuit territory, I know a few months ago they had no cases so far. So I don't know if that's still true. But yeah, every province definitely has some different standard. Right now in Ontario, I know that everything's pretty much shut down. It's back to just essentials. I actually haven't been outside in 3 weeks now, actually. The last time I was out, the last time I was out was actually for a dentist appointment. So I do know I can go to a dentist, which isn't that essential, but it kind of is, I guess. So I was surprised that we could do that in the hard lockdown we're in now. But I know during summertime, restrictions were a lot down. You just had to wear a mask, essentially. Wear a mask, use hand sanitizer at the stations they have set up in stores, abide by store policy. That was basically all you had to do during summertime. But now we're back to hard lockdown like we had in like March. So yeah, just to answer you again, yeah, provinces definitely have their own discretion, with Quebec being definitely the most strict. I don't think any other province has sort of lockdown during nighttime like that.
Oh, okay. That's yeah. So much more restrictive than it is in the United States then, because I think I read some news that in New York they're going to be allowing the restaurants to open up again at 25% capacity, and there was a rollback of the restrictions in California. So it's the Americans seem to be a little bit more liberal. Again, I suppose it depends on the states in particular, but
There could be 2 reasons to that. I mean, on one hand, they have a lot warmer states, which means they're not going to have like the cold season, I suppose you could say. And then on the other, but also they're a lot more of a, I don't want to say violent, but they're a lot more of like a protest heavy kind of people in a sense. In the opposite way is how France is, with basically a left wing. How they always protest for left wing things. In a sense, America is very prone to protesting for more right-wing things. So they simply have to like understand how much they can push the public there more
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, the Americans would stand for less pushing around. I do remember watching a video of like 2 or 3 guys who were practicing ice hockey in Canada in the open, and these 2 Karen cops came along and arrested these people. Or actually, because the guys were like 4 times bigger than the 2 Karen cops, one guy allowed himself to be arrested eventually. And they were outside practicing ice hockey on a frozen pond somewhere. So, you know, it wasn't like they were really causing any problems for anybody. It was absolutely ridiculous, like most of this stuff.
I mean, I haven't heard of that because, like I said, I rarely watch or listen to the news. It's just too depressing for me. But, and, you know, as far as I'm concerned, like, there's nothing I'm going to gain from the news. Like, the news is always changing. My views are pretty much stagnant, so I don't see a need in reading into the news too much. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that happened.
Yeah, I didn't see it on the news. This was put up by a civil liberties person on YouTube, so that's why I saw it. By the way, people in the chat, who was it? I'll just scroll up a bit and I'll find it. Someone suggested, Eric Hansen suggested I get Endeavour on, who is a Canadian YouTuber. I'll happily have Endeavour on if he wants to come on. Not a problem. I used to quite like Endeavour. I don't follow him quite so much since he went down the kind of, what's the right word, the kind of National Socialist rabbit hole that he went down, or third position rabbit hole. I haven't followed him quite so much due to that. But yeah, I've got no objection to having him Endeavour on at all. Adam, do you think you could send Brutus another thing? He may not be awake. I suspect that might be what it is, because he did a stream earlier, which was like not that long ago, probably about 7 hours ago. So he may still be asleep. For those who don't know, Brutus does shift work, so he's often like his sleeping patterns are a bit messed up.
Yeah, I'll just send him another message.
So yeah, sorry, carry on.
Oh, we're quiet, so I thought I'd provoke a bit of conversation. I was just wondering, you mentioned on Discord you're a reactionary traditionalist. I was just wondering how you define that, because I know those terms mean very different things to different people.
Well, first of all, I'm not any sort of third positionist or national socialist. But on the other hand, I'm not a traditional conservative anymore, because I don't think traditional conservatism does anything. I just think it goes left at the speed limit. And I'm certainly a traditionalist. I absolutely believe in British and old Commonwealth traditions and all that stuff, and I think we should keep them up and encourage them and teach them to our children. And I'm reactionary in exactly the way reactionary is meant to be. I basically don't want us to change stuff that works for no purpose. And like I'm also totally against stuff like gay marriage, for example. Not in favor of it at all. I think that's part of the slippery slope. I wouldn't necessarily make homosexual or lesbian relationships illegal. I wouldn't do that, but I wouldn't encourage them either. And I think the idea of gay marriage is just ridiculous. It's just nonsense, basically.
You know, you mentioned the slippery slope, and you know that I hate that term where it's like considered a fallacy, because oftentimes if there is an actual trend of something being a slippery slope, how is that a fallacy? In a sense, it's kind of just one of those remarks that people say, and it just pushes off a statement. I find I honestly hate that as a fallacy. I've actually considered before writing like a book or an essay or something on it, just to argue against that being even a fallacy, because I just find it such a ingenuous thing to call a fallacy, because oftentimes there is a trend of something being a slippery slope. Like politics, you'll see that a lot of the times, sort of, you know, like people say Hegel would say, oh, it's a dialectic. There's always the compromise in the end. But like, honestly, there's a compromise at first, but then 5 years later, it just goes to the originally leftist or liberal sort of viewpoint of what they wanted. You know, for instance, you'll have like the gay marriage debate. At first, they'll like compromise on like civil unions, but you know that's not like a static compromise, because 5 years later it'll just be gay marriage, or maybe 10 years. You know,
Yeah, it's pushing it left and left. Absolutely.
yeah. And that's why I don't understand why people say, like, you hear the same argument from both sides of where, oh, well, the left is going more left, and then the right says the right's going more right. But like, I guess me being right wing, I'm biased in this way. But the way I see it is like, how is the right becoming more right wing? Like, maybe they're being a little more resistant to it, but that doesn't mean they're going more right wing. It just means they're staying to their values more. Like the left, like, of course they're going more left. You have to argue, because like I mentioned, with the civil unions and the gay marriages, and then I guess with trans rights now is the next pushing further of that limit. You know, so they are in some sense going more left wing, except unless if you're like a really extreme leftist, in which case you always have those views. But I just mean the general left.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that at all. I don't know what Adam and Sojo think, but I think the argument that slippery slope argument is always wrong is absolute nonsense. Of course, it's not always wrong. Sometimes it's very true indeed.
Well, I think that to be honest, I think most fallacies are themselves kind of fallacies in of themselves. I mean, a lot of them. I mean, there's so many anyway, so I probably couldn't go through all of them. But there's a lot of them that seem to be sort of kind of quite modernist takes on things, and sort of designed to push arguments in a certain direction.
Yeah, I agree. Sojo, what do you reckon about that stuff?
Well, there was one thing that I did want to ask you, Duke. So you said you were against gay marriage. So are you okay with civil unions?
Yeah.
So you're fine with civil unions, but you're not okay with gay marriage.
Yeah.
So would it be fair to say that you're essentially opposed to the state saying that the churches must, you know, when I mean churches, I mean the Catholic Church, the Anglican Church, that they must they must marry you know, queers in their institutions. Is that what it is, or?
Yeah, it's that, but it's also, I don't think that it should be put on the same level as a man and a woman getting married and presumably having a family.
So what? But fundamentally, what? This is a genuine question. Fundamentally, what is, in legal terms, what's the difference between a civil union and a marriage?
Right. Well, I mean, listen, I'm actually an atheist, believe it or not. But I'm not in any way, shape, or form a militant atheist, and I could well be wrong. When I say I'm an atheist, it's purely because I don't like sitting on the fence. I could really say I was an agnostic, I suppose, but I don't like sitting on the fence. So for me, myself, I'm an atheist, but I don't necessarily think I'm correct. I could easily be wrong, and all the Christians could easily be right. So could some other groups, you know. I don't think that a union between two people of the same sex should be given the same validity or standing as a man and a woman marrying, and as was normally the case in the past, at least, having a family, because I think that's a kind of sacred deal, if that makes any sense.
Not really, because I still don't. I feel like I don't have an answer to the question, which is because when you say that you know, you want the standing of a marriage between a man and a woman to be above that of a civil union, then it begs the question: well, what is the differentiating points between the civil union and the marriage? And it's not clear to me what the difference is. If somebody in the chat knows.
Right. Yeah, in modern times, Sojo, I'd agree with you. There isn't that much difference in terms of legal standing today, but that's because our legal system has gone the wrong way, rather than anything else, in my opinion.
If I could butt in, I mean, usually that argument of the civil union and marriage thing, usually that compromise is usually done in order to make sort of religious right wingers more pleased, because in that sense they get to keep the sanctity of marriage as one of their principles, and then the left and gay people still get to have their own status like they want. So it's not meant to be legally different. It's meant to be purely linguistically a separate word, and a different spiritual, I guess you could say, relationship. That's the reason why it exists. It's not meant to be legally different. It's just meant to, I guess you could say, be spiritually different, because it's meant to appeal to those religious right wingers.
Right. Okay. Well, that's interesting, because to my mind, a wedding in a religious setting actually really has nothing to do with the state whatsoever. So the fact that the state says that you're married, to me, if you were a devout Anglican or a devout Catholic, whether the state says that you're married or not really doesn't change the sort of transcendental qualities of being married within the church before God. So I kind of look at this situation and think to myself, in many ways, I don't really understand what the big deal is. Because if the legal standing of a marriage and a civil union are effectively the same thing, then really what is the sticking point for religious people, in the sense that they're being married and they're engaging in a union between one another before God, but for queers, for homosexuals, lesbians, whatever, they're not partaking in that particular ceremony. So I in many ways, I don't really see what the big deal is.
Well, I mean, as far as I see it, there should be different standards for different countries. Like, for instance, America, one of the things they were founded upon is like secularism. So it would make sense to have a secular marriage thing in America. Ironically, they're the most quasi-traditionalist of the West, ironically, but their principles, like the founding of their country, is meant to be very liberal and very secular in that sense. But if you get to a country like Britain, they made the Anglican Church. The Queen is the head of that church. It makes sense to uphold very much more church principles in a country like that. Or I guess you could even apply to the Commonwealth as a whole. So I think there should be different standards in that sense. Like, you have to ask yourself, like, I view countries as like serving sort of they come into existence to serve like a certain purpose, in a sense. Like, America came to existence to sort of serve that liberal Enlightenment niche, but like likewise, that's not why the rest of the West exists necessarily. If you like, it's not even just constitutionalism. Like, it's even just looking at the history of a country and why it came to be. So when you look at Britain, there's a few reasons. One, it's to unite the British Isles. That's one of their purposes why it came to be. Otherwise, it would have kept separate England and Scotland. So that's one of their purposes. But then another purpose is Anglican rebellion against the Catholic Church. That's another very founding principle of like the English country or nation, you could say, or British rather. And there's other things like this. So it makes sense for them to uphold a very Anglican perspective and a very Christian perspective in that sense. It would make sense. And I say this as a non-Christian. I'm just going off the assumption that you would uphold a Christian British identity. But as far as I view it, that would be sort of the official state, but also the official nation, national identity.
And to me also, Sergio, it's about tradition. It's like, I got married in a high Anglican church. For anyone who doesn't know, high Anglican churches are not all that much different from Catholic churches. And in the graveyard of that church, my late wife's grandfather was buried, who was a chief petty officer on HMS Warspite in World War II. In the same churchyard that we got married on, and we played Jerusalem at my wedding, and my son was baptized in that same church by the same vicar, and the vicar was an ex-RAF guy.
Yeah,
and to me, it's as much about tradition as anything else.
Yeah, but I actually agree with everything you just said there. See, it strikes me that the idea that the Anglican Church would actually marry gay people, to me, is just absurd. It's just a nonsense.
But they will.
But they will. But that strikes me as being a problem with the church rather than the state. Now, you can make the argument that the Anglican Church is deeply tied into the state in the UK. I think you certainly can make that argument. But I kind of look at it and think to myself, I don't really see I personally don't really see what the problem is with having civil unions for gay people for purely legal reasons. In the sense of pensions and splitting your estate and all the obligations that come with being married. But then to push that into the religious sphere when the Bible quite clearly states that a man and a man should not lie together. That's absurd. So I suppose I'm making more of a theological argument for it in defense of the Anglican Church, and for them to stick by a true interpretation of the Bible rather than being against gay civil unions per se.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not in favour of endorsing homosexuality. Like I said, I wouldn't put people in prison for it. But I don't think we should endorse it. I just don't. I think I think if people want to do it privately, what they do in private, I don't much care. I'm not Karen. I don't really care what people do behind closed doors, providing it's not harming people who have no power, like children, etc. But I don't think we should be publicly endorsing it. I mean, I'll be honest.
Right.
In my state, if I ran a state, I wouldn't even legalize civil unions between gay people.
Right. So actually, the more I sort of unpick your view, it's that, and we've already had this conversation on many streams before. So
Yeah.
You don't really have a problem with gay people being gay, but you think that essentially by having a civil union, you are giving gay people like a rubber stamp and endorsing their behavior, and that's the thing that you think that we shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, and I think by doing that leads directly into the slippery slope stuff that Armin and others were talking about a bit earlier. Once you endorse that, then it becomes increasingly difficult to stop everything up to and including bloody transvestite story hour.
I don't know. This is where I start to think to myself, yeah. So we've had this sort of progression to where we are now, but then I think to myself, are the public really going to accept like paedophilia? I just can't. I really just can't see it happening.
Well, all right, so I'll give you a couple of examples. What about some of these tragic child abuse victims that we've seen in the US, for example? Like 7-year-old boys who are supposedly transvestites because their evil mothers and evil fathers allow that to happen. Dancing in gay strip clubs and people like giving them money for dancing in adult men giving them money for dancing in gay strip clubs. I mean, look, that's happening already. And there were people who didn't like it, but it wasn't stopped.
Do people have to accept it? I mean, people broadly don't accept like the grooming gang problem, but they're disempowered from being able to do anything about it.
Yeah. Exactly, Adam, and exactly that's what I'm talking about. Yes.
Yeah, that's an interesting one.
One viewpoint I always quite liked, which is ironically upheld by the mostly scientists, even though they don't support it in practice, is it's kind of a evolutionary view of tradition, I guess you could say, because it goes back on the assumption that like we're still tribally minded, like back, I don't know, let's say 10,000 or more years ago, our minds are basically still tribal humans. And what they said was like there might be a reason why homosexuals exist, and it's based off the fact that the more kids that a family produces, then the higher chances a gay one will come. And the viewpoint here is that, or they called it the gay uncle trope, where essentially you have a lot of kids and it's hard to support eventually for the, it's hard to support on your own having kids back then. So oftentimes in a tribe, there'd be like 1 or 2 gay people. And the thing is, since they don't have their own kids, they can just help along the rest of the tribe as sort of a laborous kind of person of the tribe. And I always quite like that view because, in my opinion, it kind of, well, it's not that I accept it, but I liked it because it kind of says that, like, okay, we don't, like, it kind of says, I'm just messing up my words here, but like basically it says they shouldn't have civil unions or marriage at all because, you know, if they have their own kids then they can't help the rest of their family. So it's kind of like, do your own sexual thing, I suppose, but you have to help the rest of your family in that. But it's ironic because a lot of these scientists say that that's like the scientific reason they exist, perhaps. But the thing is, they never support it in society. Like, usually scientists are very liberally minded in that way. Like, they don't say, okay, so we should say no civil unions or no adoption for gay people. They don't say that, but they seem to uphold it when they say that that might be why they exist, almost as a weird debunking of sort of the religious right. So it's odd that they take this oddly traditionalist route, yet they don't really uphold it in their actual viewpoints.
Well, listen. I've looked at people like, for example, Milo Yiannopoulos, for example, who has spoken about the fact that in gay society, if that's the right term, young boys are exploited. You know, teenagers are exploited. That just happens in gay society. It does. And there's also the fact, of course, that gay males are extremely promiscuous. I mean, this is one reason why the AIDS epidemic exploded, because of the extreme promiscuity. And I knew years and years ago, like a girlfriend of mine had a gay friend who in real trope terms, he was actually a hairdresser. And he was an okay guy. I didn't hate him. But he'd had sex with women, as he told me when I'd known him for quite a long time. So I'm not altogether convinced by this genetic story and all the rest of it. I think sometimes there is choice, a deliberate choice. Not always, I wouldn't pretend to say that. But I would also say that there is enough evidence that, like, I don't think two gay men, or for that matter, in my own opinion, two lesbian women should be able to adopt a child. I just don't think they should. It's not the right way to bring up children.
You mentioned that, like, he also slept with women, and so that reminded me. When it comes to that gay gene theory that they've proposed, I think that only applies to, like, strictly homosexual people, because while yes, the rates of homosexuals and bisexuals alike have increased a lot, I do think the bisexual rate has increased far more than the homosexual one. Because, I mean, it's not only about people coming out. I do think the culture, like, I think anyone could be predisposed towards bisexuality if the culture somehow endorses it. But homosexuality is more like a genetic thing, I would argue. So I think you mentioned that guy, like, it just has to do with promiscuity. Like, guys in general are quote unquote promiscuous. You know, it's usually the women that kind of filter out, like, who has sex and who doesn't, in a sense, you know. So it makes sense when you have two guys together in that sort of scenario. There's gonna be a lot more sex because, you know, there's not that filtering system that exists where it's man and woman more so.
Yeah, I mean, listen. I as God's own prototype just said in the chat, there's obviously a spectrum of impulses and tendencies. I'm sure that's true, but I just think, you know, the hard line for me would be that we should not allow these people to adopt kids. You know, some poor little innocent kid who's got nothing to do with these two people who decided to adopt them's sexual tendencies. And it's obviously going to have an effect on that child because, you know, as you grow up, you take notice, you love, and you follow in general the beliefs of your parents. So I just don't think that should be that shouldn't be allowed. They shouldn't be allowed to adopt children. And that comes back to what we were originally saying with Sojo about my view on it. That I don't think that they should be allowed to get married, because as soon as you allow people to get married, well, then they turn around and say, "Oh, well, we're allowed to be married. Then why can't we adopt?" And it comes back down to that slippery slope thing we were talking about again. You allow one thing, and then they will then push for something else.
Yeah, this is one reason why I actually like the fact that although it's not really being done in practice. This is why I like the idea that there was at least one country in the world, that being America, that sort of served this sort of meant to be this Enlightenment, liberal, hyper-individualistic society. Because I did like the idea that we're in a world where you'd have many, at least how they're meant to be, many traditional societies. I did like how there could be at least one sort of liberal or Enlightenment kind of one where people could just do what they want, no matter the risk. Because it allows people like this to just move to that one place where they'd like to. Unfortunately, it's not really being done in practice, but if that was how it worked out, where countries with their served purposes you could simply move to the one you liked mostly, kind of like Plato argued. If that was the case, then you would have a lot of these people that like ended up being under sort of gay influence. They could simply move to this country, and even if the country's very high in things like pedophilia and very high in things like child abuse, the thing is, I think if enough people notice that like a country with all these freedoms bred people like this and so much mental trauma, then I think in the end it would kind of filter itself out. People would realize, this is kind of a shit society. Maybe we shouldn't live here. And eventually, I mean, these people don't really have kids anyway. So, I mean, they would basically die off, or you would just get a few odd people around the world that would always slowly move there. And, if they like that sort of life, well, then, I mean, at least normal people and these people wouldn't have to bother each other. But likewise, if their life actually did end up being very traumatizing, very troubling, that they realized, then they would just slowly die off on itself anyway, So
yeah, that's interesting, because you're essentially saying, you treat this one country as a petri dish, and you let anything happen there, and then you sort of collect data, and then eventually, if it transpires that all of these adopted kids by gay people, it turns out that they're like a large percentage of them were abused. Then once you've got that data set, but given that we live in a particularly empirical age, I think it would be very hard to be able to make the argument that gay people should be able to adopt, if there was a whole raft of decades of data that said that if you actually let these gay people adopt kids, they just end up abusing them. So I think part of the problem is that we live in this sort of like liberal empirical age, and at the same time we don't actually really have, although I may be corrected on this, we don't really have any data to really prove one way or another that doing this would be a bad thing. But my gut reaction is, well, this isn't natural. You don't have two men together, can't have a baby together. So a male or a female family is not natural, and we probably shouldn't do it. But like I say, because we're in this sort of empirical age, you can't really say one way or another definitively.
But we do. Sorry, Atman, you carry on, mate.
Oh, I was just going to say, isn't Brighton the petri dish in this example?
Yeah, I was just going to say something quite similar. Yeah,
we just kind of need it to be there in the way it is for a bit longer, I suppose.
Yeah, but the thing is that in respect of gay couples adopting children, do we really have that much data? Because that is a new phenomenon, right?
Yeah,
that gays can adopt. So it strikes me that if you were just going to take this purely empirical approach to it, that you can't actually say one way or another at the moment whether.
I don't think anyone's ever going to collect the data, though. That's the other issue.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone ever saw this.
I find that hard to believe, though, because you've got these agencies that arrange adoptions, and that process is very, very tough. Even heterosexual couples who can't have children, the process that they have to go through to adopt a child is really very rigorous, much more rigorous than having your own children.
Do you think that's the case, Sojo? Do you not think that, as with so many other things these days, that certain groups, for example, gay or lesbian people, get buys in some ways through that system?
I don't. Well, they certainly get a leg up in society, but I think when it comes to actual recorded data, there's not really much way that you're going to get around that. What are they going to do?
What about as Adam said earlier about the so-called in inverted commas grooming gang crisis in the UK? We know for a fact that even the data they have collected, they just won't publish.
Well, that's not entirely true, is it?
It is.
We've already got the numbers of the number of people that have been raped by these gangs.
Well, yeah, but what I'm trying to say is the government collected a load of evidence about this. They had an inquiry and then refused to publish it because they know damn well if they did publish it, people would be vastly angry and it would have bad effects on their immigration policies.
Yeah, but are you not confusing two things here? So there's one thing which is the collection of the data,
Yeah,
and the number of cases of the gangs and the number of people who have been raped and are victims of these gangs.
yeah.
That's not hidden. That's public fact. That's
we don't know that, do we? We only know the figures that are released.
Yeah, but then where did all of these headlines come from that 28,000 girls were raped by these grooming gangs?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. But I mean, it could even be worse than that, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, I mean, the problem there, though, I think, is that because we do have data, but they just say the data's incomplete because it's only 30%. But they haven't improved their data since then either. There's been no moves to sort of improve that.
And there won't be either.
And similarly, I mean, there was a case a little while ago. There was a guy from the University of Bath who was trying to do a study on people that regretted transitioning, like transgender people, and he couldn't get the study off the ground. He just couldn't get it anywhere. And
no one would give him any money, etc.
Yeah, and I also kind of worry that, because you brought up about adoption earlier, do we know whether they actually record the sexual orientation of the parents? Surely.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm only guessing here, but I mean, they must do, surely.
Really? Yeah, but that could be easily made illegal in 5 years because it's discriminatory, and then you have no way of even doing data.
Absolutely correct.
But how would they? What's discriminatory about that? That's just simply the collection of data.
Well, the fact that it makes people feel bad, so they vote it to be illegal, and that's what happens. I mean, it doesn't have to be
all the time. Yeah, it happens all the time today.
It just has to become a voting issue. That's literally it. It just has to become a voting issue. They have to get their next reform in where the Overton window shifts more to the left, and then it becomes a big voting issue, and boom, now it's no longer allowed to be written down or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know. I suppose that's an open question, but I suppose this is where I think to myself, actually, I in many ways maybe have more faith in the British public and the Western public that they. But
it's not about the public, Sergio. It's about the information that they're allowed even to see. I have great faith in the common sense of the average British person or the average Canadian person or the average Australian or what have you. I have great faith in that. But if they can't see the information, if they're not allowed to see it, and if they're not allowed to talk about it, even if they do manage to find it somewhere, then it doesn't matter, does it?
Well, I think we need to look. I mean, in many ways, we don't know. So, I mean, we are kind of talking without any knowledge on this subject. We don't know. We don't know what kind of data is being collected on heterosexual adopted couples that adopt children. We don't know what information is being collected on homosexuals. We really just don't know. We're kind of just, speculating that things may get worse and they may just stop recording this stuff. If that happens, that's going to be an absolute travesty. And then the results of these experiments, we will never know until there's either a raft of kids in 30 years' time who say, yeah, I had gay adopted parents and they abused me, and there's a big scandal. So I don't know. I don't know what to say, really.
All right, let me give you an example from Australia. Right? In Australia, there is a constant campaign in the media, in the mainstream media, a constant campaign about domestic violence, and it's always in the Australian mainstream media, men versus women. Now, we know for a fact that there's a lot of domestic violence that goes the other way because blokes won't retaliate very often. And we also know in Australia that a very large proportion of domestic violence in Australia, certainly in proportion to their numbers as part of the overall Australian population, comes from Aboriginal people. But you are not allowed to say that. And if you do say it, you will get shut down straight away. Because it's not acceptable to turn around and say, although it's true that in Aboriginal families, there's huge amounts of domestic violence, but we're not allowed to say that because they're Aboriginal. And, and this happens all the time in the West for a protected group against a non-protected group. And I just don't see that anyone, in an intelligent person like Sojo, for example, I don't see how you can't see that today.
I think you're mixing up the things. So you're admitting that the data is there. You're just saying that you're not allowed to talk about it. I was just simply making the case that when it comes to homosexuals being able to adopt, that there will be data. Now, you're saying that if the data is bad, we won't be allowed to talk about it. Yeah, you're probably correct, given the current environment on that, given the examples that you've just cited, which I agree with.
Hang on, Sojo, just let me say one thing. The data was there. It's not now. They don't collect it anymore. The data
on Aboriginals?
Yeah, the data was there, but it's not now because they don't collect it anymore.
Well, that's an absolute travesty.
Yeah, but that's what's happening in the Western world all the time today.
Aren't they talking about doing that with the census in the UK?
Yeah, absolutely.
I've not heard that.
What, you haven't heard, Soju, that they're not going to ask certain questions about certain groups?
No, I've not heard that at all.
Oh, well, Adam, go for it, mate. Adam, please carry on with your point, mate.
Yeah, I'm just having a quick double check. I thought that's what I saw, but
yeah, I've seen that somewhere as well. You know, if you don't ask the question, you don't get the data, and that's assuming, of course, that the people answer the questions honestly in the first place.
Well, I mean, the thing about the census is that so many people do it. You've got such a large sample that the idea that people are going to en masse put in fake answers. Although I say that, I mean, people put Jedi as their religion, so it is possible, I suppose.
Yeah, the giant flying spaghetti monster and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, fair enough. But I mean, I just think that all of us here today have had enough experience of the way the Western world is going today, and the Anglosphere and Britain and the old Commonwealth. We've had enough experience today to know that there are certain protected groups who they either don't collect information about, or if they do, they make it very, very difficult to see what is actually going on, or, as in the case with the, in inverted commas, grooming gangs, they just don't publish it. So it doesn't matter how sensible and sane your average Joe public is, because they either can't see the information, or even if they can, they have no power to change anything.
Yeah, but with the grooming gangs, it was the case that the report was not published, and then they published a complete cop-out of a report, which I actually read. I read pages of it. I read
yeah.
And it was there was a lot of double speak in there, but the numbers have come out and they've made headlines.
Well, the numbers that they've allowed to come out have made headlines, and
but even those numbers were staggering.
Yeah, absolutely.
28,000 or whatever it was.
Yeah, I'm not disputing that for 1 second, Sergio. All I'm saying is that the public still have no power to do anything about that.
But here's the issue, and I don't know why you have so much faith in common sense, because, like, the thing is, you can have a very staggering statistic like that, but if one voter or one political culture, I did a bit of a essay on this in my political science course I was taking last semester. Like, if you have a big statistic That doesn't mean it's going to like impact everyone in the same way, because one group will say, oh, well, this proves my point, but the other side will say, well, that's a worthwhile cost, or they'll say, well, maybe it'll go away with time, or they'll say, well, I just don't care, there's more important issues for my argument. You know, a statistic motivates a political culture, but for a different political culture with completely different inherent values, like subjective, felt, emotional values, it's not going to impact them at all because they won't care. You know, like I could give a statistic that like just a fake one on the spot. I could say 75% of murderers are white, and then for one political culture, they'll be pissed off and say, "See, this proves whites are a problem." But then, you know, as a white person with subjectively loyal views to like being white, let's say, or to being British or whatever, you could say, "Well, that's a worthwhile cost. I'm not going to advocate against my own group." You know, it's not so logical in a sense. It's a lot more about your emotions, your alignments, your associations and things like that. You know, political cultures is at the main front here, and I don't know why both of you seem to have a very strong support or what's the word I'm looking for? You seem to have like a very high view of like the common man and like common sense. But the thing with those is like, again, common sense, like statistics, they matter when there's a given dialectic going around, yes, but it only impacts one group. And, you know, for a lot of these views, although a lot of the right hates boomers right now, or at least sort of dislikes their form of conservatism, the thing with them is once they're dead, it's mostly millennials and Gen Z, and Gen X is kind of a half and half generation, but it's mostly even them that are a little more left wing and these things. You know, once the boomers die, as much as the right hates them now, we're basically stuck with where these statistics won't matter at all. You know, whether they're released or not, it doesn't matter because it won't impact the cultural, emotional views of these younger generations for the most part. You know, it simply doesn't impact what they want, you know?
Yeah, it's feels versus reals.
Well, no, I mean, the thing is, as far as I view it, logic is about achieving what your emotions want. You know, I emotionally want, let's say, okay, to use you, I emotionally want a British Empire. There's nothing inherently logical in it. It's just an emotional want. But then likewise, a liberal could say, I emotionally want there to be like a United Nations government where it's just one nation all around, all the same laws. You know, neither of these are more logical. You can give a logical argument. Well, one way is more efficient economically. And then the other person can say, well, this has a better satisfaction for the country, they could say, or whatever, because people like being aligned with their nation or whatever you could say. You know, these statistics, they prove a point, yes, but neither view is inherently logical. They're just emotional wants, you know?
Yeah, I'm not sure it's that simple, to be honest. By the way, Marco Coletti Spaghetti, hello to you too. Yeah, I just think that we have more than enough evidence now, and I think Adam is looking some of this stuff up at the moment, but we have more than enough evidence now that if things don't support the globo homo view that absolutely runs us these days, certainly in UK and in Canada and Australia for the most part, if things don't support that kind of globo homo worldview, the information is very difficult to get, and even if you can get it, the general public, however sane their common sense may be, has no influence on it. Like most people in Britain have wanted mass immigration to stop for donkey's years, hasn't stopped it. And we have loads of data on that, but it hasn't stopped it at all. So the idea that, like, if gay parents adopting children is harming those children, the idea that suddenly that would in any way, shape or form be stopped because it was harming children is frankly ridiculous. Because if it was, then like the epidemic of single mothers would have been stopped ages ago, because that's certainly harming children and certainly harming boys. I'm not saying in every case, but in general terms, yes, it does. You know, children need a mother and a father, and boys in particular need a father to teach them how to be male.
To be honest, it sounds harsh, but I don't think most people can read statistics anyway.
Some truth in that for sure, and also, of course, there's lies, damn lies, there's statistics. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean there was an article just a little while ago, late last year, maybe a little bit earlier last year, and it was they were trying to sort of divert from the narrative of sort of Islamic terrorism, where they just came out and said something like, oh, a majority of terrorist attacks in the UK for the first time ever or the first time in however many years, was done by white people. So, but the difference between the proportions of those populations are obviously massive, but
Yeah.
it doesn't ultimately matter.
Listen, the Globo Homo are pushing their own view. I mean, that's obvious to all of us, surely.
Yes, but at the same time, they've already converted so many to this, I'll say, political religion. They've already converted to such an extent where it's no longer they already have their own armed force in a sense. You know, if the boomers ever rise up, they have a big millennial army. They're basically equal in population now. They basically just have to play their cards right for the next 5-10 years, and then the boomers will be mostly dead or retired, and then they're safe. So
that's an interesting point, Armin. Let me ask you, if you don't mind my saying, roughly how old are you?
19.
There you go. Right, I'm pretty sure you're the youngest person on this stream.
Yeah, I'm definitely not balding. So yeah, probably.
Yeah. I've had a shaven head for years, mate, since I was in my 20s. But there we go. But yeah, so yeah, you're the youngest person on this stream, so that's quite interesting. I think it is interesting to hear what 19-year-olds say. I mean, I don't think that the Globo Homo has infected that many people. I think it's probably infected a lot of young people because of the propaganda at school and college and university.
If you saw news lines during the 2016 election, a lot of them were centered around how Gen Z is this rebirth of the right against the millennials. But like, if you look at the political trends of how the political cultures of each age group has been going, yes, each and every generation has been becoming more left wing, except for Gen Z, where it was a slight decrease, but it wasn't enough to really offset any general trend. It was like most generations, it's like the divide is like a lot stronger. And then when you look at the change between millennial and Gen Z, it was like we're 2% more right wing, which it wasn't anywhere close to what like other generations were with becoming more and more left wing. So like Gen Z, we did technically change the trend a little bit. We did go against the trend. Somehow something happened where it didn't continue, but it wasn't to such an extent that like it made any massive change, you know? Yeah, I don't know where I'm going with this, but like basically, I don't know why it stopped, but I don't think it's really enough to make a major change at this point. I honestly think, to be very pessimistic and to very thinly allude to something here, unless the boomers do something with those guns they have, I really don't think much is going to change because they're the biggest population group with guns. They're the most angry. You know, once they're dead, we're basically stuck in this situation.
Interesting.
Not to say they should do anything, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We're totally peaceful on this stream, always. But yeah, I don't know. Like my son is in his sort of mid-20s, and he's very switched on and not at all left wing. But there again, he's an officer in the Royal Navy, so. I don't know. I wonder where we're going at the moment. I do think things could change and should, well, they must change, or otherwise great nations are going to be things of the past.
Yeah, I mean, I have nothing to say, but I agree. Yeah, no, you're right. Like, I do think that will be the trend of how it will go. I'm just saddened that there's no at least one alternative here. Like, I've definitely considered moving because of how trends are going. I won't lie, which sucks because I really love where I live. I mean, I could walk down the road and there's a whole family grave going back to the 1800s. You know, I really connect to that. But, you know, seeing how my region is dying and everything is slowly declining, I don't see much of a change anytime soon or at all, really. You know, as far as I see it, I may as well just move to Siberia and hope Russia doesn't go the same way, which I really hate to say, but you know. I could see some random Siberian farmer or something, you know.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. Look. I mean, the whole point of the streams that we do every Saturday is we're trying to look at ways that we could conceivably save our nations. You know, like UK, if it carries on at the present rate, in the 2060s, it's going to become a white minority nation. And as far as I'm concerned, as soon as that happens, UK is a dead duck. It just, won't exist anymore for any practical purposes. So we've got to talk about demographics. I mean, this is another reason I'm not in favor of gay marriage and encouraging the whole gay thing. It is because one of the things we've got to do is change demographics, and to change demographics, you've and most importantly got to stop massive third-world immigration, and B, you've got to put up your own birth rates, and that also coming into that, of course, is feminism, because the idea of career women is absolutely against that, because when women should be having kids is in their 20s. They should be having children and not trying to make themselves a great career, and then desperately trying to have a child when they're like 38 and just about have 3 eggs left. But I don't know what other people think about that.
There's also the issue where women they're more left-wing usually, but especially now because what's this professor called now? He's actually a doctor in theology, so it's kind of an unrelated thing. But he has lots of research in evolution, I think, too. Let me just remember what his name is. He's okay. I'll think of his name later. But he's been releasing a lot of videos lately where basically he's saying a lot of the left-wing elements right now, and one of the such groups is sort of the third-wave feminist kind of things. Is he's saying that there's been, ever since the Industrial Revolution, because there's no more of that filtering of unhealthy children dying, essentially, there's been a big uptick in brain mutations. And one such group is among sort of these, okay, so you know how there was a lot of witch trials, right? Back in the Renaissance and after that period?
Mm-hmm.
Well, basically his argument was that the witches were, these odd women that would isolate themselves. They were hyper individualistic. They were anti-conformity. And he's saying that these women that's why they were burned. Often, yes, it's true. They weren't literal witches, but they did kind of play with that aesthetic simply to rebel against society in a sense. And that's why they were burned. And these are the kind of women you're getting now with the sort of third wave feminists in universities and such, because a lot of them do dress kind of neo-goth too, in a way. They're very anti-conformity. They hate their own society. That's for multiple reasons. It'd be hard to get into his whole ideology right now, but basically, we're getting an uptick of these women now again, because we basically, to be blunt, we haven't purged them through the evolutionary process in a sense. We haven't gotten rid of those brain mutations, and so they breed and they continue to develop in more people because there's no longer that evolutionary filter. And so, for a lot of women now, it's not merely that they're more empathetic. It's literally women are different now. Men too, of course. I mean, men have the same brain mutations. If such a woman gives birth to a boy, then he'll probably have a similar brain mutation. But that's one of the issues now too. Is you these women, as part of their conformity, they hate the in-group. That's another brain mutation he's been going on about, is our group associations from OxyContin, I believe, has completely changed. It's gone to where people get warm feelings by helping the in-group, helping the nation or helping the tribe. Yeah, that's him. Cademon. Yeah, you got him. Yeah, they've basically gone from rewarding them, the reward system from rewarding them for helping the in-group to where it rewards them for hurting the in-group. They actually get a rush when they hurt the nation or the family or the area or whatever association they have, their tribal identity, right? So
I think it's a commonplace that giving women the vote was a huge, massive mistake. But I mean, that's certainly something I believe. But then I think giving people the vote who are under, say, 25 was also a massive mistake, unless they were serving or had served in the armed forces, which would be my exception for that. Service equals citizenship is something that I kind of support.
You said you're Australian, right?
No way, man! I'm an Englishman.
Oh,
I'm an Englishman. When I left the British Army, I moved to South Africa. I lived in South Africa for 15 years, and then I met an Aussie chick in South Africa and moved to Australia about 20 years ago. But my son is still in England, and he's serving in the Royal Navy.
Okay, all right. I remember somewhere one of you saying Australia. Okay, so you live there right now.
I live there, but I'm not an Australian. I would not pretend to be. I'm a POM as far as Australians are concerned.
Yeah, I forgot what I was going to add to that, so never mind.
Guys, Adam and Sojo, what's your takes on that stuff?
I think with the women thing, I don't think it's as big a deal as people make out about voting. Because I mean, women. I mean, I'm not really sure if I can actually say this, but women, as far as I've always seen, kind of help to police and hold up whatever the sort of prevailing culture is. So if you look at voting records from like not long after the vote was actually given to women, they were voting more conservatively or more right wing than even the men of the time.
Hang on though, Adam. Is it not true that Ramsay MacDonald became Prime Minister in the very early 1920s, not long after women were given the vote?
Right, but that wasn't off the back of the women's vote, though, was it?
No, I presume it had something to do with it.
I might have to go and look at the data again, but I seem to remember the women's vote as a bloc being much more right wing than it was left wing.
Well,
and the only reason we see women voting left now is because that is the new prevailing culture.
I tell you two things about that. First of all, like the original suffragettes were bitches, basically. Sorry, Sojo, but they were middle class bitches who went around giving white feathers to guys who'd been wounded in battle in the First World War who were wearing civilian clothes in the UK. I met a guy who that happened to. He was wounded in the Battle of the Somme in 1916, and in 1917 he was on leave in UK before he was going back to join his battalion in France, and some middle class prat came up and gave him a white feather because he was in civilian clothes. It did happen, and there were many instances of that happening. And what happened was that the leaders of the suffragettes, who incidentally were also actual terrorists, they blew things up and what have you. The leaders of the suffragettes went into league with the Liberal government in 1914 and supported the war full on. Okay, so yeah, they were right wing up to a point, although actually they were supporting the Liberal government that took Britain into the First World War, which I think was like the original sin of Britain and the British Empire, if you like. It was the thing that absolutely made it end when it did. Was joining the First World War in 1914, and then in particular in raising a mass land army. But anyway, that's true. But there's also the fact that women have generally voted. Wives tend to vote the way their husbands did, or at least they used to. I'm not so sure if that's true anymore, but they used to. So yeah, there's that point. I'll give you that, Adam. But I'm not sure. In general terms, I don't see any great advantages in allowing women to vote. But I don't see any great advantage in allowing a lot of people to vote, to be honest with you, given that democracy is an illusion anyway.
Yeah, I agree with that. But even off the back of that, like if you look at the recent American election, married white women was like Trump's biggest single demographic.
Was it? That's interesting. I mean, I don't know if that's true, but I'll take your word for it.
I've heard that as well. I've seen that.
Yeah, fair enough. But I mean, I remember before the election, all these people talking about the fact that it was middle-class white women who weren't going to vote Trump. So I don't know. I mean, I'll take you Adam and Sojo, I'll take your word for it for sure, because I haven't looked at it. But I do remember before the election, people saying that it was middle-class suburban white women who weren't going to vote for Trump. But there again, I mean, loads of 19th century Victorians voted for Biden. You know, he had more votes from people born in the 19th century than any American president going back to Teddy Roosevelt. So, you know.
Mm.
Do carry on, guys. I mean, I was just making an interjection. You carry on.
Yeah. No. That was interesting. I can't see her name now. It's Adamat, I think.
Yeah.
That you mentioned that like women usually go with like the trend of the society, because one thing I do know is like women are like more religious. So I think one of the reasons they're more right wing was because religion was more right wing then. But nowadays, many major churches are very left wing and trying to just get as many church members as possible in a bid to stay relevant. Likewise, you get a lot of women into sort of the new age group, which is kind of fulfilling that purpose they need, I guess you could say, that sort of psychological necessity of them. Yeah, I'm quite interested in the psychology of religion for this reason, because it really shows how people think and how different groups think like that. But yeah, I guess one of the reasons they were more right wing was just because religion as a whole was more right wing, and nowadays it's more decentralized and very left wing, both among churches and odd esoteric groups, you could say.
Yeah, that's probably a good point. What about you, Sojo?
I wanted to pick up on the point about the biological argument. And if that's true, I'm afraid that I don't really see much hope for the future, because with the advancements in medicine that we've had, that natural process of the weak perishing, as young infants, that situation's not gonna come back, unless there's a collapse in, the effectiveness of antibiotics and that kind of thing. So based on that outlook, the future looks pretty grim if it really is, biologically deterministic.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Although, of course, apparently like millions are dying from the coof. Don't see the bodies in the streets, but yeah, they're trying to claim that. Hello, Halcyon Daisy. Nice to see you in the chat. Yeah, I don't know. I think we've got to separate the things that we can do in the West in terms of statistics and collecting data and all that kind of stuff. I think we've got to separate that from the things that will be done in the West, because they won't be done because of global homo. I mean, another point, Western male testosterone has been dropping for like a long time now. We have statistics on this, but what we don't get is any statistics on why. And there must be a reason, if you're a believer in science, and generally speaking, I am a believer in science, there must be a reason for that. But we know it is dropping, but we don't know why. I wonder.
I don't think that's true. I think there's actually quite a lot of data to suggest that even, your average household product that's plastics based contains things that antagonize with your free testosterone levels. The food that we eat is pumped full of hormones, milk, chicken, so on and so forth.
Yep.
So it's not like there's no data on that. If you're interested in health and fitness, and if you watch the kind of bodybuilding channels and that kind of thing on YouTube, a lot of these guys talk about these kind of things. And I go to a TRT doctor every once a year, maybe, I suppose, to get my bloods done, get my testosterone levels checked. And he's always banging on about, well, the modern world is not very, it's not suited for the way that we're built.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important not to have plastics that contain BPA because it's bad for you. Even things like touching receipts that you're given at the shops contain chemicals that are going to increase your estrogen and things like this. So
wow.
There is there's a lot of data on this stuff. It's not really widely known other than to people who are health fanatics.
But that's my point, Sojo, is that yes, there is loads of data around, but you just can't find it because no one gives it any publicity. Because
Yeah,
who cares if male testosterone levels are falling? Because after all men have this toxic masculinity that the left talks about all the time.
Yeah, I mean, from a public health point of view, it's kind of funny, really, because my doctor was saying that he said, "Oh, you're not a candidate for TRT, but your levels compared to the 1950s, you would be." So what's happening is that the way they aggregate the data or the way they measure the data is that they adjust the average year on year. But of course, what you're getting is a decrease over time in the average, and so technically speaking, you could say, "Oh yeah, you're above average." But then if you compare that from 2020 to 1950, you're
The
actually
average is
below
falling, yeah.
average. But because the benchmark is the current testosterone level, everything looks a-okay. So there's not really very much sort of retrospective analysis that goes into that.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, sorry, go on.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't have interrupted. I was just going to say that reminds me, because like if you look at old photos of like people in their teens or early 20s, a lot of them do look older, and often the reason is like people say it's just how they're dressing, and but like if you just look at their face itself, you can see that they were a lot more developed and old looking. Like they look more like young adults now do, and it's kind of scary to think that some people might not ever develop to that amount.
Well, it's like when I was in the army, I started losing my hair like in my early 20s. And the reason male pattern baldness comes about is mainly testosterone. That's why women don't tend to lose their hair. So
Yeah,
I just shaved it. I just thought, fuck this, I'm just going to shave it. I didn't try and do comb overs and all that sort of silly nonsense.
I should just mention, as a fellow bald person with you, Duke, that low testosterone levels aren't linked to baldness. It's there's a molecule called DHT.
No, I said high testosterone levels, Sojo, not low ones.
Yeah, right. So high testosterone levels that I think leads to excess DHT, which is the compound or the molecule that antagonizes with the hair follicles.
Yeah.
That results in you losing your hair. Yeah. But whether that's interesting to think about. I've never looked at any sort of information about this, but certainly when I look at older photographs, people seem to have thicker hairlines and less receded hairlines than we have now. But maybe
I wouldn't say that was true, Sojo, to be honest. I mean, as someone who looks at a lot of old photographs of soldiers and sailors and so on, I think lots of people did. But what you've got to also remember is when you're looking at old photographs, people are almost always wearing hats in those days.
And the other thing as well is that because I was just about to mention that there may be a selection bias in this, because obviously photographs weren't really readily available. And, the typical kind of photographs that I've seen are of young men who are in the army. So it's a bit of a skewed and biased selection of photos that I'm looking at. So
and also look at their facial hair. Like in the 19th century in particular, loads of guys had great big moustaches and beards and all this kind of stuff, which some people seem to have difficulty in growing these days.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that's worth looking at. But if you're looking like at general photographs, if for example you follow Daughter of Albion's channel, who puts out some great videos on like old British people and stuff like that, you'll see that nearly all the men are wearing a hat of some description or other. So it's a bit difficult to tell what their balding situation is in that sense.
Yeah.
But I know my dad lost his hair young. I know his granddad lost his hair young. I know his dad lost his hair young. So it's kind of been but like I said, I shaved my head in the 20s, and like I've never had a problem with women. Like women kind of like that. So I don't think young men should worry about that if they get it. I know my dad did, ridiculously enough, but I never. But there we go.
Just to bring this conversation back into trying to sort of bring it into a conclusion, which is that given the way that everything is going at the minute, I'm increasingly coming to the conclusion that actually in this day and age you have to be more hyper individualistic, which is kind of counterintuitive to what we want. But it just strikes me that really in this day and age, given the things that we've just spoken about, that you have to look inwards to yourself to overcome these issues that face us. So, in respect of the situation with declining testosterone, there's not going to be a government program to make sure that men get their levels back up to where they were in the 1950s. That's going to have to be on you. So you're going to have to do that yourself. So in a kind of strange kind of way, we're living in an age where you kind of really do have to be more individualistic and think about yourself rather than the group, because these things aren't going to happen at a sort of top-down societal level.
But I think also you can look at guys like physically should make sure that they're in reasonable physical shape. That's something you should do individually for sure, but I think it's also something that you can do in a kind of group setting. Like, for example, I know there's people like Top Cat, etc., who are into boxing clubs and stuff like that. I think those are good things for Western blokes. Like boxing, for example, is a traditional British and old Commonwealth sport for boys to do. And I think it's also good because it teaches them self-defense, and boys should learn how to defend themselves. And also, if they're with a woman or an old person or something, they should be able to defend those people. So I think that, I agree with you, but I think that some of that can also be done as a group, maybe as a group, a small group of mates. I think mateship is something like, given that I live in Australia, mateship's a really big deal down here, or at least it used to be before males were seen as toxic. So you can do it as an individual, and you should do it as an individual because you should be the best man you can be. But I also think like groups of mates can do that stuff together as well. Adam, what do you think about that stuff?
Yeah, people should be exercising. People should be lifting weights.
Yeah.
I don't know if any of you guys
cardio as well, not just lifting weights.
I don't know if any of you guys remember this guy, this American guy, Earl Lederman, and he used to set out like things he thought all men should be able to do in order to survive. So he said that like everyone should be able to swim like a mile, and everyone should be able to do like, I think it was like 15 pull-ups or something.
Yeah, basic fitness. I mean, the kind of stuff that you learn in the military, for example. Absolutely. I agree with that. I mean, we've spoken in the past about like bringing back some form of national service that might not necessarily do the military great good because they spend half the time training the guys, but the basic self-discipline and what have you would actually be good for most men and boys.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know when about exactly this changed. I remember when I was really young in primary school, all schools still had like an old-fashioned gymnasium, and they were teaching kids to like climb and stuff like that. And then I don't know, that sort of in the sort of mid 90s to late 90s, that all disappeared. Suddenly, schools didn't have those anymore.
Yeah, because you shouldn't have competition because and boys thrive on competition.
Yeah, I mean they've kind of killed off the scouts as well, haven't they?
Yeah, they absolutely have. Yeah, I totally agree. That's another traditional British and old Commonwealth story. We're in a toxic environment for men these days. I mean, I think that it would be very difficult to argue that that's not true. I think even Sojo would agree with that.
Yeah, toxic in the way that it's like competition to the bottom, I suppose.
And prizes for everyone who competes, even if they're useless.
I think it's the impression I get is that it's superficially things with like toxic masculinity and all this kind of thing. But I have to say, I think a lot of boys just ignore it and just laugh at it. It's like, that's gay, and it is gay.
Yeah, it is.
I don't know whether that really is fundamentally changing their behavior. I think that when you get like a Karen kind of person, sort of lecturing boys, that their natural reaction is just to take the piss and tell them to fuck off. Basically, that's I don't think that's changed.
Yeah. Well, one thing when you read Coming Apart and you were going through some of the details of it, and I was kind of thinking afterwards, I thought how much of sort of the degradation of social values amongst sort of lower class people is down to the fact that they're kind of leaderless because they don't have the connection to what their current leadership is expecting of them.
That's a good question.
Look, I know, for example, like my son was like, he played rugby at his school, and he joined the Sea Scouts and all this kind of stuff, and all of that. Not only did it like encourage his general fitness and taught him useful skills, but it also very much gave him mates and all that kind of thing,
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think, well, I shouldn't say that I think, because it's been a long time since I've been at school. But boys don't just make friends when they're playing sports. They don't forget that when the kids are in the playground, and I assume they still play sports in the playground, that's a place that they're interacting and socializing and getting up to hijinks. I don't think you can really tame just the kind of things that young boys get up to, despite all of the sort of like the pearl clutching that the left talk about. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just sort of reminiscing about my times at school, going back, 25 years. but
when I was at school, Sergio, we used to play in the playground. Obviously we played soccer. We sometimes played cricket and this kind of stuff. But we also played shit like British Bulldog, which
we did that too.
Yeah, which was a pretty rough game, which I'm pretty sure these days teachers would frown upon, at least the way we played it.
But the thing is that I don't know how you can stop the kids from doing that.
Even in my high school, actually, the only thing we were allowed to play was touch football. They didn't allow you to like tackle or even do anything along those lines. It was merely a light tap you're allowed to do in football. And
there you go. There's my point.
Yeah, but it was that.
Football, I don't mean the European one. I mean like the rugby kind of football thing.
Yeah.
But was that an actual structured lesson?
It was part of the gym classes. Yes.
Right, part of the gym class. Okay, because in I don't know what it's like in Canadian and American schools, but so like when you were at school, and you would have like a lunchtime or a break time. Do people just hang out in the cafeteria, or do they actually go outside and play sport? Because that's in the UK, when there's like lunchtime or there's a break, the kids go out to the playground and actually play soccer or or whatever. But maybe it's like culturally different in North America. I don't know.
Well, if you were in like primary school or like middle school, then yeah, you'd usually play a sport. I grew up where most of the kids played soccer. I was actually like one of two boys who didn't play it too often. I usually just played like some make-believe game with one of my friends. But yeah, soccer was a big thing then. High school kids don't really play sports. They usually go off and smoke or maybe I don't know, just walk around. But yeah, in primary school it was lots of soccer because I grew up in kind of a European area. I guess you could say upper class. I wasn't upper class, but they were upper class.
Armin, could I ask you, like, I know that in Canada particularly, like, ice hockey is a big deal, and that's a very, what traditionally was a very roughy-toughy kind of male sport. Is that still a big deal there? Is it still being encouraged in schools?
Well, I grew up in the city in Toronto. The kids are mostly more into, how do I put it? They're kind of in their, okay, so you're either poor and you're into rap culture, or you're well off and you're kind of a pussy. But for up north where I live now, basically the kids are okay, so they're rednecks. I found they're just as, man, I hate sounding arrogant, but they showed some of the same sort of psychological traits I saw among the rapper kind of people. Like they're kind of dumb, manipulable, kind of brute. So, but yeah, they definitely play hockey. The school didn't really do much with that, but like kids on their own time would definitely join leagues and that.
Sure.
Actually, where I live, there used to be an ice rink, and then some rednecks stole some shit. They stole like all the ice cleaning shit, and the municipality didn't give a damn. They said, okay, we're just going to close it down. We don't want to replace the equipment or anything. So
that would have made it more difficult for people to actually go and play ice hockey, even on their own time.
oh yeah, they made it hard for even like future politicians to fix it up because they straight up just demolished it and sold the property. It was just an outdoor rink. It was just a shed, a piece of concrete, and some wood boards on all the sides, and they stripped it, got rid of everything, and then just sold it off to someone. It's impressive.
Yeah, that's my point, you see, is that they are discouraging this kind of stuff, you know. But like I sent my son to a private school because there was no way I was going to send him to a state school. And they played rugby union and they play cricket. And like there are games where if you play them properly and you play them hard, you're liable to get hurt. And that's healthy for boys. You have to do that with boys. And it just seems to me that the whole tenor of modern Western society, Anglosphere society, if you like, is against that.
Duke, when well, I suppose this is a question for everybody, but I remember when I was at school that occasionally you would get times when there was an organized fight and everybody got really excited about it, and so you get a circle in the playground and everybody was like standing around, and then there'd be this sort of like fight that broke out. It kind of, I don't know, there's something really quite thrilling about it, like being there, like in the atmosphere. It's like sort of bare knuckle fighting between these kids. I don't know, has that changed? Hard for me to say because I'm not
Definitely.
I remember we used to get into fights with other schools.
Yeah, that's right.
Like groups going on would get into fights with other schools when I was a kid, and a load of girls would come along to egg us on and all this kind of stuff. So that used to happen. I don't think it does now.
Well, I remember when I was at school and we took a trip to Hampton Court Palace, and of course you get coaches going with many other schools as well, and like the inter-school rivalry that would sort of spring up, like you wouldn't even know who these kids were, what school they were from, but because they were from another school, it was like, you know, they're the enemy, and there would be fights breaking out over that kind of thing as well. So I don't know, maybe I just like lived in a different time that was more raw. I don't know.
We had when I was at school, we used to have. All right, when I was at school, we used to have fights. We had inter-school fights as well. Yeah. But then right by the last year, that seemed to have sort of died out. And I remember I went through this park between two of these big schools where there used to be a lot of these sorts of fights. And I saw this big crowd and I thought, oh, there's a fight. And I ran over there and they were having a fucking rap battle. I was disappointed.
Fucking rap battle. Oh, sorry, I just find that so funny. Oh my god!
I remember even when I was in the army, like if you got into a fight and like it was serious enough that you either the cops got called or the military police, or you got bashed up enough that like your corporal or sergeant would notice, you probably get called up in front of your officer. And in my day, which is the early 1980s or early mid 1980s, if you then turn around and said to your company officer, who was a captain or a major, it was for the honor of the regiment, sir, he'd just say, fair enough, because you were fighting another unit. Yeah, that was just fair enough, because that was what you're supposed to do. I think that's dying out again, and it's dying out because of the increasing feminization of the army.
I'm just going to button here because I actually have to leave very soon. But I wanted to note, like for fighting back when I was in school, even in high school, not allowed at all. There was a no hands-on policy. If you even just like defended yourself from someone, you would get. In fact, even if you didn't defend yourself, the fact that you were in the fight basically it's a guaranteed getting in trouble, so you may as well stab the person because you're getting in trouble anyway, even just by them punching you. I mean, because you were in a fight. And then in high school, if any of the teachers or principals or anyone heard if there was a fight somewhere, even if they didn't like know where, they would like send teachers out in different directions, just trying to find out where it's going to happen, and they would lay charges on both kids if they could. This is one thing I really hate about the Western legal system, is where the state takes it upon like it being like a state infraction. I really hate that because it's obviously an issue between two people. I much prefer the boomers would hate this, but I much prefer the Iranian system, where even for things like murder, it's considered an infraction against the victim's family, and then they have a bit of leeway in if they want to let the person go or if they want to like punish them, and how do they want to punish that person. I much prefer that system because clearly it's an issue between those two people, especially if it's just a fight and they consent to it. Like, you can't even consent to getting punched at school. You'll get charged if you do it. It's ridiculous. They're charging kids basically.
Wow.
But yeah, I will know. I actually have to go very soon. I thought this would be like an hour and a half maybe. But
yeah, our streams are usually a couple of hours, occasionally a bit more. But thank you very much for coming on, and I'll certainly have you back again. In the next couple of weeks, I'm looking to have a stream which is deliberately going to be looking at kind of Australia, New Zealand, and Canada in particular. So I'd especially like to have you on for that. So thanks very much for coming on, and I look forward to speaking to you again in the future.
Yeah, thanks, mate. I'll definitely come back on when the time comes. Just give me a PM or whatever, and
Well, and it's been particularly useful having a younger person on here, because I think that although I'm the oldest person on here, I know for a fact that Sojo and Atman is slightly older than you as well. So cool. Thanks for coming on. One thing I will say, guys, is that what Armin just said increasingly is what goes on. Like, I remember when I was a young man, if you got in a punch up in a pub and it was just a punch up and it was just two blokes, nothing much happened. These days, even in Australia, for example, if two blokes get in a punch up in a pub, cops are going to turn up. Didn't used to happen in the old days if it was just a straight up punch up between two blokes.
Yeah, but I mean, speaking to my dad a couple of days ago, and he was reminiscing about the time when he was able to drink drive. So things really have changed. But certainly,
I could argue about drink driving if you like, but I won't, because fair enough. But I'm not sure that two grown-up men having a straight up no weapons fight is a reason to call the cops in the same way that someone drink driving is.
Oh no! I'm certainly not condoning drink driving. I'm not advocating to bring back drink driving at all. I'm just
what I'm saying is I think they're two different issues.
Yeah, but what I was going to illustrate was that the amount of enforcement that we have now is much greater than it was before. So, like, going back to when I was at school, if we got into a fight, at the worst we'd have a detention. But from what Armin's saying, that people are basically now excluded, and even the police are brought into it. And that just wouldn't have happened when I was at school. It would have been dealt with by the school. The police would not be brought into it whatsoever. And even then, when the school dealt with it, it wouldn't result in an exclusion. To be excluded, you would have to be a persistent offender.
Yeah, I totally agree, and that was a better and more healthy system. Incidentally, can I just say, Marco Coletti's spaghetti? Don't get in a fight with a group of guys off a Royal Navy warship on a port visit, mate, because I don't think you'll come out on top. But there we go.
I think he doesn't want to come out on top. I think that's the point.
Yeah, I think that's probably what it is. He probably is. That's probably him hoping, to be honest. But yeah, really, like a group of Royal Navy guys having a drink in a pub on a port visit is you don't want to annoy them, mate. You really don't. There's some pretty tough guys in the Royal Navy these days, even these days. So yeah, absolutely. I don't know what's happened to Brewis this evening. I'm presuming the guy was just too tired and didn't show up.
Yeah, he hasn't read my messages yet.
Oh well, he's probably just asleep. Like I said, he was doing a stream like 7 hours ago or something like that. But I just think that like even all the stuff that we've been talking about now just shows. I mean, even just what Sojo was saying just a couple of minutes ago, it just shows that we are living in an increasingly we're living in an increasingly kind of nanny state where like to behave like a typical red-blooded male is more and more difficult.
Yeah, it's because you're viewed basically as a unit of the state, right? And while I'm very much into like a somewhat strong state in some manners, it's like nowadays the way it's presenting, it's one thing I hate about the UN is like you can't even renounce your statehood. It's actually like they won't recognize it. Most countries won't recognize it, and you have to go through weird legal loopholes in order to do so. So because of this, you're basically, instead of it being like viewed as like a loyal citizen who wants to serve his country, it's more just viewed as you being like literally like as a sheep, like you're owned by the state. So it's your parent, right? It's basically it's doing what's quote unquote best for you, which really just means what's safest for you, which is not always the same thing. Regardless of what you want, really. So it's kind of scary because that view of like people being cattle is very, I mean, it's detrimental, but it's also just, it's an inherently scary idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyways, I should probably go now. So
Okay, thanks for coming on, Armin. Very nice to meet you.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, man. We'll have you on again. Thank you very much.
yeah, nice to meet you too. Sorry if I interrupted a few times, but
yeah, man, you were cool. You were cool. Thank you very much for coming on.
All right, thanks. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Talk to you later.
Duke, we haven't touched on the what's happened with the EU and the vaccines.
Go on then.
Well, I suppose the only thing I can say is what an absolute monumental fuck up they made of it. In the sense that they want these vaccines, they spend 6 months negotiating for some vaccines. They've only just approved the AstraZeneca vaccine, and then they come out with quite possibly the worst statement that you could ever tell a British person, which is that we don't believe in queuing and fair play, which is essentially what they said when they said that they didn't believe in first in line in a queue. So I kind of look at this and think to myself, I would love to see a poll of support for rejoining the EU after this fuck up, and we haven't even mentioned on their schizophrenic invocation of Article 16 on Northern Ireland, and then they backtracked on it. And I find it really funny because all of this time, the past 4 years, we've had people like Sam Harris clutching his pearls that Trump's in charge of the nuclear football, and at any moment he could make a rash decision. And it turns out that the people who make the people that make. Sorry, say that again. I can't hear.
When they say Trump's in charge of the nuclear football and could make a rash decision, does he mean as opposed to Pakistan, for example?
Right. Well, yeah, that's equally as valid. That's equally as valid. And it just strikes me as being absolutely ridiculous that we had 4 years of Trump who really did nothing, wasn't really a danger to anybody. And then you get the EU who, at the slight appearance of a crisis, they sort of spark a diplomatic incident. So who's got the cool head, Trump or the EU? I just found that really quite amusing, really, because it just shows that they're the ones who are not really mentally stable. They're not really thinking things through.
I don't know. I'm totally against the China virus vaccine. I think it's been enormously rushed. I mean, like a normal vaccine takes 4 or 5 years to be tested. This hasn't
Yep,
even
that's all true.
this hasn't even had a year. Some of the vaccines, at least, are more gene therapy than a traditional vaccine. I'm against that.
Why?
Because I don't want people doing gene therapy on me or anyone I love or care about.
How come?
Because I just don't. I'm just against gene therapy. Also, why do we need a vaccine for a disease, or sorry, for a virus that has a 99.7% survival rate? I mean, the whole thing is nonsense to me.
What's the? I mean, I haven't really been following this in in the last little bit. What's the actual outcome of this whole EU kerfuffle?
Oh, so they invoked Article 16 and then they rescinded it pretty much immediately.
All right.
I mean, I just think we should tell the EU to get fucked over Northern Ireland and say Northern Ireland's British and you can get stuffed. And I don't know what the EU could really do about it, to be honest with you.
Well, it's interesting the way they actually didn't consult Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, on this at all.
Well, the Republic of Ireland's views on it have nothing to do with it. The Northern Ireland is British. I mean, like,
No, that's
I have nothing against the Republic of Ireland. My mother was born there. But
that's very good, very good. But
Northern Ireland is British, and it's got nothing to do with Southern Ireland. It's British. I know what the EU's treaty that Alexander Boris Johnson signed is, but I think we should just say no. We're not going to do that. Get stuffed. And if the EU wants to do anything about it, well, we have a Royal Navy and a Royal Air Force, frankly. That's my honest view on it. I would just tell them all to get stuffed. Northern Ireland is British. Want to do something about it? Well, try it. They're not our friends. I don't believe these people are our friends at all. But mind you, I don't believe Alexander Boris Johnson's our friend either. So,
well, I mean, the EU doesn't appear to be much of a friend to the Republic of Ireland either. So,
well, that's pretty obvious. Yeah, given the mass immigration they're encouraging there, which also the provisional IRA's political wing, Sinn Féin, are also encouraging. Totally agree with that.
Well, I mean, the thing with that is that you kind of, I mean, this is kind of a funny dynamic, but because you see this with a lot of these small little independence movements that pop up as well, is they seem to believe that it's actually like this awful big imperial Britain that's holding them back from being like a leftist utopia. And then of course they push for this stuff. Yeah, yeah, exactly. But then they push for this stuff, and then you find like somewhere like Ireland actually stays pretty conservative for quite a long time after it's left.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Like, listen, Ireland used to be a fairly traditional kind of Catholic society until like only one generation ago, and from one generation they've gone from a fairly traditional Catholic society into full-on global homo. And I know many Irish people hate it.
Yeah, but they're kind of in the same situation that we are.
Yep, and they can't do anything about it because, like, we have no power whatsoever. Like, we can talk on the internet so long as our corporate globalist overlords allow us to, but that's all we can do at the moment.
Yeah.
Hang on, let me see. Bolero 393, Iron Duke, do you think the SNP will get Scotland to leave and you'll have another Culloden to keep them in the UK? No, I don't. Bolero 393, I actually spoke to Colin Liddell of the Affirmative Right website yesterday, and Colin is a really good Scotsman. And what we agreed upon in that stream was that the answer to the SNP in Scotland, because the SNP are not a real Scottish nationalist movement. First of all, they want Scotland to leave the UK, where it's a fairly important part of, where it is a very important part of the UK, and they want it to become a very, very tiny and extremely unimportant part of the EU. So they're not really Scottish nationalists. And they also play upon a lot of Irish people's views who moved to Scotland in the 19th century during the Industrial Revolution, rather than real Scottish views. And what Colin was saying was that, as a Scotsman, Colin is a Scotsman, what he was saying was that the answer to that is there needs to be a homegrown Scottish unionist party, which is maybe socially conservative, but maybe a little bit more left-wing in economic terms. And that would probably, in due course, draw Scottish people away from the SNP. So yeah, I mean, look, I'm the last of the Empire loyalists, mate. So I obviously am fully in support of the United Kingdom, and I think that England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland together are far stronger than they would be as separate organisations. Who the bloody hell is running taps?
That's me.
Are you in the bathroom again, mate?
I'm making a coffee.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
My headset's got a very long lead on it.
Wow, you're lucky. Mine's only about 4 feet or something like that. So yeah, I don't know. Sojo, what do you reckon about that stuff, mate?
Well, it strikes me that the prescription for a Conservative Party in Scotland is actually pretty much where it should be in England as well, because it would capture. We already know from the data that fucking kettle. We already know from the data that the electorate. Yes, the electorate. We know the electorate is more to the right socially, not just with Conservative MPs, but even Labour voters as well. So I think Labour voters are more to the right on social issues than parliamentary Tories. So if you want to capture sort of that Labour vote, or capture more of the Labour vote in England and also in Scotland, then it strikes me that if the Tories move further to the left on economics and a little bit further right on social issues, then there's a whole demographic there that they could capture. So it strikes me that plan for Scotland wouldn't just work in Scotland, but it would also work in England as well. So, but I think his point about there being like a sort of separate unionist party in Scotland probably would be a good idea, because you get to separate the sort of toxicity of Thatcher from conservatism in Scotland. That's probably a good thing. That's probably even necessary.
Yeah, possibly so. Adaman, what do you think about that stuff, mate?
Didn't Mosley do this like right back in the day? Didn't he have a separate BUF for Scotland with their own sort of leadership and stuff like that?
I don't know.
I need to look more into it, I think.
Yeah, I don't. Funnily enough, I don't really know that much about Mosley.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's one of those things where you kind of have to go looking for it if you want to sort of learn about it. But yeah, I mean, yeah, that's kind of that seems like the way to go. You kind of have to, if you want to have a unionist movement in Scotland, it has to be Scotland's unionist movement.
Yeah, and then you could, if you think about it, with the unionist parties in Northern Ireland, they're a separate entity. They look after Northern Ireland and their vote, and they're much further to the right than any other part of the UK. But they will still cooperate with the main Tory party in the UK. because their interests overlap. So that kind of federation of conservatism could absolutely work in the UK, where you have a dominant English Tory party that then has like a sort of not necessarily a formal coalition with the unionist parties in Scotland and Northern Ireland, but like a sort of a loose agreement, a gentleman's agreement about the things that they're going to vote on. So that would probably work quite nicely.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Seems to make some sense. I don't know. I just think that we're up against it these days. Like we have no power. When I say we, those of us on the right, we have no power, none whatever, and almost everything is against us, which might make us stronger in the long term, perhaps.
Well, I don't think there's any reason to believe that so far. I'm not seeing any sort of nascent organizations being created as a sort of groundwork for the future.
I don't know. I think there is I get a little sense that there are people who are moving away from the completely failed, like National Socialist, Nazi LARPing bollocks, to some sort of real form of nationalism. I do get a little sense of that.
Yeah, but they're a tiny minority of people anyway, so they're not going to budge the dial. It's not like 15% of the UK is like committed to National Socialism. It's more like 1.5%, if that.
Well, I think it's I don't know. I committed to is a big deal.
Well, take the BNP as a benchmark. What do they get? 2% of the national vote. So let's assume that they're all hardcore nationalists, National Socialists, which they probably weren't. But those are the kind of numbers that we're dealing with. So, they're not really. They're not even. It's not even worth worrying about, or even thinking about.
All right. What I mean by what I said there was the kind of people who discuss nationalism online. I think we are making some kind of inroads into that.
Well, I think that's just going to happen naturally with the collapse of all of the energy that surrounded Mark Collett, that sort of really began not last year, but actually the year before. So it would have been 2019. It's probably the second half of 2019 when he said he was going to launch a party, and here we are, January 2021, and I think that their application to the Electoral Commission has failed again. So
no surprise, is it?
They're not going anywhere, and actually, I just don't think about them at all. I don't follow them on Twitter. I'm not subscribed to any of their YouTube channels. I mean, they're nothing. They're absolute nobodies.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. But what I mean is that when you say the energy attached to it, I'm not sure there was that much. But the thing was,
no, there was a lot of energy in 2019,
but only in the sense that people in the UK are so desperate for any kind of form of nationalism that they latched onto that as the only thing there was, if you see what I mean.
Again, I think I need to sort of contextualize it in the sense that really the energy was just within the YouTube community.
So I'm not disagreeing with that. What I'm trying, and on Twitter and what have you, but what I'm trying to say is I don't think there was that much energy because of Mark Collett, who's been around for a very long time.
Yeah.
I think the energy was only because there's so many British people who are desperate for some sort of nationalist group they can support. I don't think most of them were actually Nazi LARPers.
Well, I can attest to this because when I wasn't really aware of the full range of his views, shall we say, when this thing first came around. And so my view was that, okay, this guy's been in the BNP. So what? I mean, a lot of people voted for the BNP. It's not necessarily full of cranks. And then obviously as time went by, you learn about the videos, and then you hear about the things that he says on stream. That's like, oh shit, this guy is actually this guy actually is what the media have sort of made him out to be. And so I think you're right that if I take myself as an example, that I thought, oh yeah, there's energy here, and there's a movement here, there's a party here, and that seems to have all fizzled away in the same way that I've lost interest, because the sort of the person who doesn't have these kind of radical views on a whole range of subjects that I don't really want to talk about is naturally going to be put off by it. But I certainly was invigorated at the thought of there being a genuinely nationalist party that wasn't just going to be sort of neoliberal, sort of right-wing economics.
Adam, and what do you think about that stuff?
Yeah, I do broadly agree with Sojo.
Same. Like, I can't disagree with that. Look, I briefly talked about this yesterday with Colin Liddell, and like as Colin said, like as soon as you come out with, "Oh, my favorite book is Mein Kampf," you're just sunk in modern politics.
Yeah, you're finished.
You're finished.
Finished.
So yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I think that we need a populist. I mean, this was why I supported the 37 thing in the first place, is because we need a populist party that is based on British history and British culture. And hello, Brutus, do you want to come on, mate? If you want to come on, I will. You've got the link. Please come on, mate, because we can do up to 3 as far as I'm concerned. So
yeah, well, I don't mind. I'm just sitting around anyway, so
that's all right, Bruce. Come on, mate. You've got the link. I sent it to you by email. I believe Atman sent it to you as well. Please come on.
So, I mean, about this question that Valero's put up.
Yep.
Did any of you? I can't remember which stream it was. It was an AA stream, and he was talking with Charlemagne, and I think he caused a bit of a. I think they caused a bit of a kerfuffle because they basically both seem to think that the time for red pilling is over, and we need to be gatekeeping and working with what we've got.
Yeah,
I made a tweet about that. It's just cringe.
Yeah, I watched that.
I mean, what are we gatekeeping? A small niche online community? I mean, that is, what does that achieve?
Yeah, but I mean, in the interest of playing devil's advocate, one point I will make, right, is in the early days of sort of the alt-right, when they were making many a great success, there was a lot of inbuilt gatekeeping. Like there was a lot to that sort of 4chan culture that it was just very hard for a regular person to penetrate. There was all these phrases, various, just lots of different language and certain sort of nuance to the memes, which I think those guys thought was a lot cleverer than it actually was. But at the end of the day, that was also a time when that movement was actually pretty successful.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's actually a correlation there at all, but it just seemed to me that since most of the sort of shadowy cover of that, as the veil's been pulled away, they don't seem to have as much success as they used to.
Well, I think in many ways, actually, this is probably a very good criticism of NRX, is that it sets the bar so high and it's so intellectual that it actually is inaccessible to normal people, and that's the route that the right seems to be going down at the minute. So if you think about it from like a marketing point of view, what do you want? You want a simple message. But if you start talking about the cathedral and the inner party and the outer party and all this shit, the general public aren't even going to know what the fucking hell you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I've experimented. Yeah. Sometimes I've experimented with just using phrases like the establishment because there's kind of like, there's a built-in kind of understanding of that. But the problem there is it's kind of a leftist understanding. So it's not quite, what you want to go for. Not entirely anyway.
Well, except that the establishment is overwhelmingly leftist these days.
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't know. I don't find the NRX stuff particularly difficult concepts to come to terms with. But
Well, I mean, Duke, if somebody said, "Oh, I really want to know about what this cathedral is," and I said, "Yeah, go and read some Mencius Moldbug," I'm not being funny, but when I read that guy's writings, it's like I think to myself, "What the fuck is this?" It's just like word salad. It's just absolute word salad. Even I can't be asked to read all of it. Boring.
Yeah, I grant you. He likes to demonstrate how well read he is a lot.
Yes, that's a fair point. Very fair point.
Yeah, and on top of that as well, he writes like a millennial talks, so it's kind of just awkward to read.
Well, he's also the enemy he talks about. Like his family history is totally cathedral.
Yeah.
As he fully admits. So I like that alone makes me doubt him a bit. And he's terrible as a live speaker. Like he says and ah far more than I do, you know.
Yeah.
So I have my problems with Moldbug, I have to say, and I have my problems with NRX because, like, I think I see what they're trying to do. And it might even work in America, which is an enormous country with like a huge population. But by the time NRX conceivably work, Britain will be long gone. As a country that could be saved, it will be long gone. So I don't think it's practical in that sense. And I also found it very interesting that like big NRX supporters like Charlemagne, for example, became big, full-on, like going for Trump guys, and to some degree, even that happened with AA as well. So I found that quite interesting, also.
Well, I've also noticed that AA is increasingly going down the Jew route. It's very subtle. It's very subtle, but if you read between the lines of what he says every now and then, it's getting worse and worse.
I'd argue against that, to be honest, Sojo. I think what AA is doing is what I do, which is to say, yeah, okay, there's some truth in the JQ because there is, but I don't see him going much further than that, to be honest.
I'll send you a couple of tweets then.
Yeah, I was going to say, because he tweeted today, he retweeted James Lindsay, who was talking about anti-Semitism. And he was saying, like, don't touch it, don't touch the conversation. And I thought, well, what, like, he's never talked about this before ever. And now.
Yeah, and then it was followed up by tweets about the CRT, which is some Jewish group. And I clipped him and put it on my Twitter. And I'll send it to you, Duke. Just listen to it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Please do. I don't know. Look, what I would say about IA is that he is, to some degree, these days running a business. And it worries me a little bit that he is running his business rather than giving his real views. So that might have something to do with that. I don't know.
Well, I mean, who are we talking about? Sorry,
we're talking about academic agent, mate.
Oh,
are you on your phone?
Yeah. Is the sound all right, or does it sound?
Yeah,
really
it's
bad?
fine. It's just different. That's all.
Yeah, you're fine, mate.
Oh, okay. I'm lying in bed. I'm nice and snug.
Nice and snug.
Yeah, couldn't bother to get up. So there you go. Oh,
I hope Sarah is asleep.
Oh god, yeah. Anyway, moving on.
Yeah, carry on, guys. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
That's all right. So what's going on, guys? What are we talking about?
We're talking about academic agent and if he's going down the JQ route too strongly. I'm not sure that he is, but Sojo seems to think he is, and Adam perhaps thinks he is. I'm not sure.
I think he's been fired from his job, though, isn't he?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. He's running a business now, and I wonder to what extent the fact that he's running a business now is influencing what he's saying. I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure. And like I said, I haven't seen these tweets because I'm not on Twitter. So I only see what academic agent says on YouTube and that other channel that he has.
You think he's talking about the Jewish question to get a bigger audience?
Perhaps.
No, I'm saying that it's my impression that he thinks that they are a causal problem, but he won't go any further than that because he basically can't risk getting his channel nuked. But
Yeah,
if you sort of read between the lines, he's saying, yeah, this is the problem, but I can't talk about it. And that's
yeah.
he pretty much says that in the clip that I took from his YouTube stream with Keith Woods.
Yeah, fair enough.
I only watched some of that. I can only take Keith Woods in relatively small doses. I don't know. Like I'm in between you guys on all this stuff because I think there's some truth in the JQ, but I think it's enormously exaggerated on the dissident right. That's my ultimate view of it.
What part of it do you think is exaggerated? I mean, let's take the porn industry. Do you think they've been pushing porn or not?
I think loads of people push porn, including them. I don't think the porn industry is our biggest problem, but some people do for whatever reason.
I mean, you must have seen that clip where they're interviewing that Jewish guy, and he's like, "Yeah, the Jews basically run the porn industry," and everyone laughs.
Well, there's lots of Jewish guys in the media, of course there are. But I don't think porn is our biggest problem. I think we've got so many other problems that are bigger than porn. It's ridiculous. It's an easy one to pick.
I'm not saying it's our biggest problem. I just picked it out as one. It's the first thing that popped in my head. But I mean, I'm just saying, like whenever you look at any of our problems, you always seem to find a Jew sitting there. That's the point I'm getting at.
Yeah, I think that, like I said, I think there's some truth in the JQ. But the idea that it's a central problem, I think, is hugely exaggerated. Like there's loads of bad Gentiles. There just are.
But what is actually meant by the JQ?
It's the Jewish question, isn't it?
Yeah, but what does that mean? Can you like elaborate on it more?
Well, I think it just means like it's a subject matter that needs to be talked about. That's what the JQ really means. And I think the point is that people aren't allowed to talk about it. That's because I mean originally the whole thing about the JQ started off because there were it was a distinction between the alt-right and the alt-light, wasn't it? Because the alt-right would talk about the JQ and race realism, and the alt-light wouldn't. So it's a forbidden question.
That's not even quite true, Bruce. I mean, like Colin, who I interviewed yesterday, and I know you watched that stream because you commented on it. As Colin said, it's like Colin was one of the founders of the alt-right, but he was also one of the first to realize that if you go down this route of making nationalism about Adolf Hitler worship and all the rest of it, which I know you understand because like you started this 37 thing. If you go down that route, you kind of make yourself totally illegitimate because in the minds of most people, that can never be an okay thing to do. Like Adolf Hitler was not a good guy, and he wasn't a good guy. He wasn't even a good guy if you were a bloody German.
Yeah. Hello?
Yeah, I'm listening. Go carry
Oh
on.
no, yeah. No, well I mean I don't think the Jewish just because you're talking about the Jews doesn't mean you have to be a fan of Adolf Hitler. That's the problem here. These two subject matters have been associated together. But the way I see it, I mean, you can talk about the Jewish question in depth and still realize that Hitler was a moron. I mean, E. Michael Jones could be an example of this. He doesn't have a very high opinion of Adolf Hitler because obviously Hitler's a pagan, and so Jones, he's not really into him. So yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem. Like people seem to think that I'm like, what I'm doing is like optics or something, and I just want to cover things up and not talk about Hitler because it's bad optics and support Churchill because it's good optics or whatever. But it's got nothing to do with optics for me. It's about the truth. And the truth of the matter is Hitler was a moron that started a war that he couldn't finish. And I've got
100%
no
agree.
problem.
100% agree. 100%
Yeah.
agree.
And I've got no problem saying that Churchill was in bed with the Jews and that there was a large Jewish influence on his life. I got no problem at all saying that, because the fact of the matter is, throughout history, many European leaders had their court Jews. You know, Churchill's not the first one. So and I think Churchill was right when he said that the Jews were part and parcel of the British Empire. You know, or the British Empire needs its moneylenders. So it doesn't really bother me at all. I mean, I don't think Churchill was anti-English or anti-British Empire. He just saw the Jews as being part and parcel of the British Empire. I mean, the way I would spin the whole thing is just to say that Churchill got cheated. We got stabbed in the back, basically, in the same way that the National Socialists go on about the Germans going on about being stabbed in the back in the First World War, because the Germans liberated the Jewish people in 1871. Bismarck gave the Jews free rein to do whatever they want, and they rose to the top of Jewish society. Sorry,
Yes, he
German society, dominated everything, and Hitler's beef was that they got stabbed in the back by the Jews in the First World War. Well, I would say the same story, the same
Brutus,
thing kind of happened to us, in that yes, the Jewish people were part and parcel of the British Empire, and yes, in part the war, in part, not in whole, but at least in part, there was an influence there to the start in the Second World War. But they stabbed us in the back. So, I'm not trying to do optics or cover anything up or anything like that. I just speaking the truth. Really.
So, what was the stab in the back regarding Britain?
Well, we helped them out. I mean, we helped create Israel. We did the Balfour Declaration, didn't we?
But what was the stab in the back? What was the event that
our empire was dismantled?
But why is that? Why is that the fault of the Jews and not basically a whole range of? I mean, I would point to
the American.
It wasn't like a really obvious stab in the back. I'm just saying from a cultural point of view, it's like we helped create Israel. We helped the Jewish people. No matter what the Jewish people are doing to us now, encouraging mass immigration.
Brutus, hang on. I'd say two things to this. I mean, first of all, Churchill lived beyond his means. Okay, he was an aristocrat who didn't have an aristocrat's salary, particularly when he was sacked from the cabinet. And in the wilderness years, like in the late 1920s and early 1930s, he lived beyond his means. And Churchill took money from just about any group that would give him money. He wrote for some very crappy American tabloids, etc., as an example. So, okay, Churchill took money from Jewish groups. He did. But he took money from anyone who would give him money, pretty much, for anything, including, like I said, some very dubious articles for American tabloids. The other thing I would say is the stab in the back in Germany in 1918 did not exist. It was a myth. The German army was defeated in the field mainly by the British army, actually, or the British and Commonwealth army, because the Australians and Canadians and New Zealanders played a huge part. They were absolutely defeated in the field, and Ludendorff, the German commander-in-chief, realized this, and that's why he insisted they sue for an armistice. In terms of Britain starting the war in some way or another because of the Jewish people, that's just crap, because for a start, Churchill didn't start the war. Churchill was not even in the cabinet when the war started.
Yeah, I understand it.
Wait, let me finish. It was purely Chamberlain. And if you're going to look at the dissolution of the British Empire afterwards, I mean, I would say it was a combination of the left in Britain itself, like the Labour Party, particularly Attlee and all that lot, the people who gave us our wonderful NHS, and the Americans were the
Yeah.
biggest deals about that. So look, yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I would agree with pretty much all of that. I mean, I'm just saying, I'm just trying to spin it in a way that our National Socialist friends can understand, right? Because they view history through a German lens, and they're obsessed with like the stab in the back in Germany and etc. etc. So I'm just trying to say to them, if any of them are listening, we got stabbed in the back. I mean, that's the way I would spin it. See what I mean?
by the Americans and Winston Churchill, who had an American mother, and his American mother was little more than an aristocratic whore, in all honesty, like, to be honest. But yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we got stabbed in the back just in like a broad cultural sense, in that in the post-war period, obviously, you got all this cultural Marxism, most of which is coming from America, by the way. I mean, the Americans like to blame us for everything, but if you look at it, it's like the world was doing all right when we were in charge. It's when they took over that everything went wrong.
Well, if you
Um,
look at the guys who started all this stuff, the what are they called? I can't remember now. They were actually mainly German and Jewish, but they left Germany because of Adolf Hitler and went to America.
yeah,
This is where the kind of the first place this stuff started. So yeah, from that point of view, you're right. It was more the Americans infecting Britain than Britain infecting the Americans.
yeah, yeah. America's the great Satan.
Well, I wouldn't go
Basically,
that I wouldn't go that far, but yeah,
I
okay.
would. I'm getting there.
Yeah,
I'm getting there.
I just wish that Churchill hadn't had an American mother and had a more realistic view of America in the 1930s and 1940s. Like, Churchill thought that there was some great English-speaking peoples thing, which was bollocks, frankly. I think there was the old Commonwealth. There was Britain, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. I think that was a real thing to a large degree. But the Americans were totally separate from that. And I mean, up until the 1930s, the Americans were still planning for a war against the British Empire.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I just think it needs to be pointed out that they wrecked everything. I mean, I'm just trying to push back against this anti-English sentiment. It's like, well, when we had the British Empire, things were actually pretty good,
Yeah.
and as I say, it was collapsed by Attlee. The Yankees took it over, and now look at the world. Look at what they've done. And I think all of this is in part because America's built on revolutionary principles, unlike our country. I mean, America's built on the 1776 revolution, and so it's like France in a way. It's like a revolutionary nation. It's part of their DNA, and so I think it makes, because of that, the kind of striving for liberty that they have. It was easier for them to embrace all this cultural Marxist nonsense, because all you got to do is just frame it as liberty, frame it as part of the Constitution or whatever, and then it's like, okay, let's have gay sex, fantastic, and then that just gets spread all across the world, and that's what's happened in the last 70 years.
Well, I mean, I agree, because you can also look at, like, the American Revolution worked. American Revolution's not really the right word. The American War of Independence worked, which was really a civil war, but it worked because not only did France was the biggest supporter of the American revolutionaries. Then there was Spain, then there was Holland, who just tagged along. But then also half of the British establishment supported the Americans as well. There were British generals and British admirals who wouldn't fight against the Americans. And there were loads of people in Parliament. Yeah, and there were loads of people in Parliament who supported the Americans. That's the basic reason why Britain eventually lost. But then you've also got to look at the fact that the French spent so much money helping the Americans in their War of Independence that in 1789 that almost directly led to the French Revolution.
Yeah, he bankrupted himself, didn't he? Old
Yeah.
Louis
Yeah,
Louis
absolutely,
XVI, wasn't it? Yeah.
absolutely right. Sojo, what do you think about that stuff, mate?
So I'm sort of in a bit of a trance there, just listening to you two. Oh shit, where to begin, really?
Yeah, where to begin? You got the Jewish question, the American Revolution, cultural Marxism,
The French Revolution.
Churchill. Just pick one. I don't know.
I think I can only really comment on sort of the collapse of the empire after the war, and I kind of just look at it as being inevitable, really, in a sense that the British Empire and its size and its like economic output was dwarfed by the Americans by the turn of the century.
That's
And
not
so
true. That's not true, Sojo.
that is true.
Not the empire. Britain itself, sure, not the empire.
You got Britain that had what, 36 million people, maybe 4 million people in Australia, maybe 1 million people in New Zealand, maybe a couple
Canada.
of million in Canada.
More, but there were more than that. But yeah, okay.
So we're talking maybe 60 million people, maybe.
Yeah, but the vast majority of the United States was not industrialized at that stage, mate.
Yeah, but I don't think that's true, because when it comes to their ability to outproduce everything that we had, I mean they put together a massive. They effectively fought two wars on two fronts.
When?
And
When?
During World War II.
That's 1945, mate. What are you talking about before that?
No. So I'm saying that the industrial rise of America really was inevitable in them
to some degree. Yeah, to some degree. Sorry, I'm thinking you're talking about.
I'll clarify. So basically, in the 1940s, there was 90 million Americans and maybe 60 million people in the Commonwealth. So by a factor of 1.5, they're bigger than us. They've got all the natural resources that they want. They've got a unified continent, and it just strikes me as being inevitable that they would eventually usurp us. Because World War II bankrupted us, but did it bankrupt America?
Well,
not
no,
really.
It made them a fortune.
It made them a fortune, and they were able to not only produce all of the armaments and build up their military, which they didn't really have in rapid time, but they're also supplying us and also supplying the Soviet Union. So I just look at it as just simple power politics and think, well, yeah, it was really just inevitable.
Yeah, but we also need to remember that the UK paid the Americans back for all that wonderful Lend-Lease shit, and the Soviet Union never did, of course. But leaving that aside, I was really talking about going back to about 1900 rather than 1945.
Yeah, but that's when the rot set in, because 1907 with the the Washington Naval Treaty or whatever it was. And
no, it was in the 1920s, mate. But what I'm talking about is if you go back, to me anyway, the original British sin, that doomed the British Empire to an early death, etc., was World War One.
That certainly compounded things, definitely.
Britain didn't need to join World War One in 1914. The Royal Navy and the British had decisively outbuilt the Germans in terms of warships. Okay, the German Navy could not beat the Royal Navy in the First World War. It was impossible, as was proved at Jutland, for example. Britain didn't need to join the war in 1914. We especially did not need to raise an enormous conscripted mass land army that would cause us enormous casualties and loads of financial difficulties for paying for it all. Had Britain not done that, then all world history might have been different. I think, for example, if Britain hadn't joined the war in 1914, Germany would have beaten France by 1915, and I very much doubt it would have been very much worse than the German victory over France in 1870.
Mm.
You know, and it wouldn't have affected Britain because, like I said, the Royal Navy had vastly outbuilt the Germans, and had the war not started in 1914, Britain would have carried on building battleships and cruisers and destroyers and submarines and all the rest of it. So that there was no way that Germany was able to, and there weren't enough shipyards on the continent to outbuild Britain. Couldn't be done. So I just think that, like, our original mistake as Britain was joining the First World War. And I believe had someone like Lord Salisbury been in charge, we wouldn't have done so.
Mm.
And had we done so in, say, 1915 or 1916, we would have done so purely as a naval power, with a British army that was a projectile that could be fired by the Royal Navy anywhere in the world against the Germans to, for example, take away all their colonies, which they couldn't have done a damn thing about because the Royal Navy was so much more powerful. And that is the way Britain should have gone in the First World War. But instead, we got trapped into this entente cordiale nonsense with France and Russia, who were by no means traditional British friends, for reasons I've never understood. And we get now, you'll get idiots coming out with, oh, no, but if Britain had, this stream will stay up, Puffwagon. I never take my streams down. If it gets taken down, it will be by YouTube, not by me.
Well, we've not said anything in this stream that's controversial at all, in my view.
Yeah, and we never do. Like, we're utterly peaceful. We never suggest anyone should get killed. We never suggest violence. Why
no
would
racism.
anyone? No, absolutely not. But anyway, my view is that Britain's original sin was joining the First World War in 1914, and even more, raising a mass land army for that. Had we not done that, then most of the other shit that followed from the First World War wouldn't have happened.
Mm.
First World War was a huge disaster for Europe, sure it was, but it didn't have to be a huge disaster for the British Empire.
Yeah.
The fact that it was purely because we decided to join it, and I don't understand why we did.
Mm.
We had nothing to gain and everything to lose.
Yeah, well, maybe it's just part of the cycles of empires. Maybe that, it's just sort of cyclical, and you get an imperial power that makes these fatal mistakes, and then the baton passes to someone else. I don't know, but it happened, and we are where we are, and I would just absolutely love to get back to a period of splendid isolation and just become, Switzerland's floating off of the off the continent in the North Atlantic. That'd be great.
Well, I wouldn't like to be Switzerland, to be honest. I'd like to be an extremely naval, powerful nation that didn't have a big army, but had a very powerful navy and a relatively powerful air force that could operate out of area if it needed to. Basically going back to a traditional British maritime policy.
Mm. Well, if we restructured the military so that the navy was more important, do you think having a bigger navy would be sufficient to defend the Falkland Islands? I mean, it strikes me that it makes sense to actually have a bigger navy because you could just have a lot more submarines and just sink any Argentinian boats that come anywhere near the Falklands.
Well, a lot more submarine. Look, I'd like a Royal Navy that had the two aircraft carriers that we have now.
You let Brutus on, please.
Yep, I will. I'd like a Royal Navy that had the two aircraft carriers that we have now, that are very big, powerful ships, that if the British government will ever spend the money, could carry like 40 or 50 F-35B fighter bombers plus 10 or 15 helicopters. I'd like the Royal Navy to have a couple of ships similar to the Canberra class in Australia, which are landing ship docks that can also carry half a dozen F-35Bs if they want to. I'd like us to have 25 to 30 major escorts rather than the nominal 19 we have at the moment. And we've got 7 nuclear hunter-killer subs at the moment. We should have at least 10 or 12. A Royal Navy like that would be dangerous to even the most powerful naval nations in the world.
But the thing is that I look at the aircraft carriers and think to myself, okay, like at a sort of like a red-blooded male level, it's really cool to have 2 aircraft carriers. But the thing that I don't like about it is that when you've got an overtly offensive military capability like that, that we are inevitably at some point going to get dragged into a fucking foreign war.
Well, it's not overtly offensive because what you can do.
What do you mean it's not overtly offensive? You've got a blue water navy that can.
I'm about to tell you if you listen from there.
Sorry.
What an aircraft carrier allows you to do is to send a task force anywhere in the world, and it doesn't have to fight. It can sit just over the horizon and it can stop a fight before it starts. Because the vast majority of nations in the world can't fight an aircraft carrier, like a full big aircraft carrier, like a HMS Queen Elizabeth class. So you can actually stop a war before it starts. Now, does that mean that you might then, if you've got allies like, say, Australia or America or New Zealand or Canada or what have you, does it sometimes mean that you might get dragged into a fight out of area? Yes, it does. But if you can't do that, you become an unimportant nation. And like I said, I am not a supporter of British Switzerland. Britain has to be more powerful than that, but it has to be powerful on the sea and in the air, which is related to being on the sea. So,
sorry, just to clarify on my remarks about being a North Atlantic Switzerland, that wasn't to say that we didn't have any military capability. I'm hinting at the idea of just having a Britain that's neutral and is isolated and just doesn't bother with the rest of the world, and it just gets on with its own business.
So you wouldn't support Australia or New Zealand or Canada, for example?
Oh no, I would support them, but I wouldn't. I wouldn't want to get into any entanglements in any other arenas with America and whatnot.
If you're going to support Australia, then you've got to be anti-Chinese, for example.
He's got a point.
Yeah, you've got me there.
You kind of have to be, because China wants Australia pretty much.
The thing I don't like about it is we're always going to be second fiddle to the Yankees.
Yeah.
Well, there's not much you can do about that, mate, unless you can make British industry even bigger than the Americans. Listen, Britain at the moment is building towards having, as she should have, the second most powerful navy in the world on the non-communist side. The Chinese have a very powerful navy, but the thing is, China can't operate out of her area. She's very powerful in the South China Sea, but she can't operate in the Indian Ocean, for example, and she most certainly can't operate in the Atlantic.
Yeah,
way out in the Pacific. The Royal Navy can operate just about anywhere around the world, because Britain just about has enough supply ships in the Royal Fleet Auxiliary to be able to supply most of the Royal Navy anywhere in the world. That's the difference.
But do you not think it's just a matter of time before the Chinese have the biggest navy in the world?
No, I think that within the next 10 years, easily within the next 10 years, there's going to be a war with China, and China's navy is going to be basically destroyed.
What do you think? What, over Taiwan?
Yeah, probably over Taiwan, but if not over Taiwan, over Australia or over Japan.
I think it strikes me that it would be over Taiwan, because
most likely, yeah.
Taiwan seems to be a real big flashpoint, because the Chinese
they want it.
They're very overt about it. They're like, no, this is ours, and we're coming for it eventually.
Yeah.
The fly in the ointment is that the Americans have got essentially all of the Western world's semiconductors production capacity is in China. is in Taiwan. So this is like a
Really?
this is a real big problem for the Americans. The Americans really don't have any fabrication plants in the US at all.
It's even bigger than that. Like if the Americans allowed the Chinese Communist Party to take over Taiwan and didn't do anything about it, America would have no allies left in that part of the world. None, because no one would trust her.
I don't know. I just think because the chip fabrication thing is such an important issue for the Americans, it literally is critical to their national security, that they will back Taiwan.
Are we talking about Intel here?
Yeah. So when I say chip fabrication, I'm talking about semiconductors, like all the chips in your computers.
Yeah,
A lot of this stuff is manufactured in Taiwan.
So not just Intel, other stuff as well.
Yeah. So AMD, all sorts of other chips for all sorts of reasons.
We're talking from two different points of view here, but I think we're basically agreeing is that America cannot afford to allow China to invade Taiwan.
Yeah, I was just explaining why.
I think something we can all agree on is that it's easier to.
Who's that? Who's the third person? Who's that?
That's Adamant.
Hello, mate. How's it going, buddy?
Adamant, what were you saying, mate?
I was just going to say it's the one thing we can all agree on is that it's probably a lot easier to stop all these refugee dinghies coming over if you just run them over with the destroyer.
You can run them over with an offshore patrol boat, but don't think you'll have them. But yeah, look, listen, I just think that there's going to be a war with China, whatever we do. Like I know my boy, for example, has been training for this for some time. The UK is sending a carrier task force to Australia probably later this year, depending on other stuff. And that's going to include frigates and destroyers and also a nuclear hunter-killer submarine. And it may or may not include some European ships. I'm not by any means sure that it will at the moment, but it doesn't matter. And a lot of Australians are quite looking forward to seeing HMS Queen Elizabeth and like half a dozen other British warships in Sydney Harbour, which will be the first time they've been there since the 1950s. Britain's also reopening her naval base on Singapore. And like, you know, this is why I don't agree with the British Switzerland idea, is that Britain needs to do that, because like if Britain has any great friends in the world, they are people like Australia and Canada. And I don't mean their governments at the moment, although the Australian government's pretty friendly to Britain. But the people in Australia and New Zealand and Canada are basically like, to a large degree, British people, you know, or British descent people, I should say.
Yeah, I think you can say the same thing about the Americans. You know, I don't really meet many Americans that are anti-British.
No, nor do I.
Other than the ones that are overtly Irish, they're always the problem. Always.
Yeah, I agree with that, but I also would say, and you get that to a lesser degree in Australia.
Except when they're calling us the eternal Anglo and cut.
Yeah, but again, these are basically NatSocs online, so they're not representative of like 1776 type boomers who are, I think, generally quite, you know, welcoming of us. That's been my.
Well, they are, but I mean, the foundation of their nation is built on a war against us, right?
It's a war against the king.
Hang on, guys. But what I would say is this: is that when British people are talking to Australians or New Zealanders or Canadians, there is a much more level playing field there.
Yeah,
we're kind of like equal nations, if you see what I mean. Actually, Britain's probably a bit more powerful than those. And we can like regard each other as friends and brothers, whereas with the Americans, you've always got a bit of that big daddy thing these days.
Yeah,
that's the slight difference, I think. You know, like
let me ask you,
Australia can be allies in the sense of, and Canada, for example, can be allies, and they can be like level allies, if you see what I mean. Whereas with America, there's always like the Americans want to be top dog because
Yeah.
they are bigger and a bit more powerful, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me ask you, I mean, what do you think about, because we're talking about China here. You got me to watch that documentary. It's very good, The New Normal.
Yeah.
And in that documentary, they're talking about China. There's some Chinese guy, he wrote a book. He used to work for Google, and he was just saying how China is like this new tech superpower, and they've got, you know, AI doing everything in China, and they've got a cashless society already, and they've got all kinds of apps and tracking apps and so on and so forth. And they've got a social credit scheme, and it seems like they're doing all this stuff over there, and then they're going to bring it over here. And so it just seems like it seems like a China's emerging as some kind of new global superpower, and it seems like at least some part of America, or at least big tech in America, seems to be on board with it. So, I mean, what do you think is going on there?
Go on, guys. I speak too much.
So I've just come back from the toilet, so I've just missed pretty much everything that Brutus said.
Oh, that's
Adam, what do you reckon, mate?
Well, I don't know. Well, one of the things I found kind of weird was the way that there seems to be this big push towards like electricity, away from gas, away from everything like that, and towards electricity, electrical components and battery components. And I don't know what China's share of that is in the global market, but it's always struck me as a little bit weird. Like there seems to be some sort of handover going on that's sort of unspoken.
Yeah, but people have been talking about this for years. Like our industrial base has been moved to China. I mean, China makes everything now. It's the great industrial nation of the world, basically.
Yeah, but
we have become consumer countries. Everything's made there. They've got a billion people, more than a billion. They're a homogeneous society. They're basically a dictatorship. I mean, they get stuff done. This is a serious threat, and you know, the whole world's being bankrupted now. Everybody's in lockdown, and who's making a profit? China's making a profit, and the elites of the world seem to be sitting back and allowing this to happen. So I don't really understand, like, what makes you think they're going to fight for Taiwan, or maybe there's just a division within the oligarchs, and one of them want to go in one direction and the other want to go in the other direction. I don't know.
Well, Brutus, first of all, you got to look. If America allows the Chinese Communist Party to invade Taiwan, they will have no allies in that part of the world at all. And every single one of their allies around the world will certainly look at America and go, well, we can't rely on them at all. And America will effectively, if they do that, America will effectively be handing over leadership of the world to China. And I just don't think they can afford to do that. The other thing is more practical. Right now, America, with her allies in that region, which would be to say Australia and Japan principally, but also perhaps South Korea, and certainly the British, will defeat China. They just will. Like the Chinese Navy, providing it's a naval air war and not a boots on the ground war for the most part. I'm not saying you can't do commando raids to destroy Chinese ports, and they might well do that. But in terms of like the vast majority of the war would be a naval war, aircraft carrier war, and an air war. And right now, America and its allies, like I say, Australia, Japan, UK, possibly South Korea, will win. If we leave that 10 years, we won't. And my opinion is that that's what's going to happen, is before that 10 years is out. Whether or not like the oligarchs in America want that to happen, it's going to happen, because no country will like deliberately become second rate, which is what the Americans would do if they.
Why would the Chinese start a war that they can't win? I mean, they're not completely stupid, are they? They could
no. The Chinese kind of have to start that war.
Why?
Because China must advance or she stops.
Yeah,
Okay?
but hang on a minute. So, sorry to jump in, but I really want to bring this point up. But you're saying that, if we leave it, 10 years, the Chinese are going to have this big naval power.
Yep.
So actually, the onus is on the Americans to take the Chinese out first, because the Chinese can just sit back and wait.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Yes.
Yeah. So it won't be China that starts it. It will be the Americans.
No. Hang on. Look, China. You look at the leadership in China. Okay. Look at like Winnie the Pooh, as everyone calls him, quite rightly.
Winnie the Pooh. Is that what they call him?
Yeah, the leader of China. Yeah.
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I do too, because he does kind of look like him. Apparently, it's like illegal in China. You can get sent to jail for calling him that. But if you look at this guy, he's quite elderly. He's not going to be around in 10 years, mate. I think it's going to happen before 10 years. And the Chinese, like the Chinese Communist Party, does a lot of things for things that are happening in China, not the rest of the world. Okay, so I think that China will increase the pressure on Taiwan.
I'm not understanding why they need to start the war, though. Why not just sit there, wait for America to collapse? It's obviously going to collapse.
It's not going to collapse. It's not going to collapse in 10 years, though, Bruce.
But they've locked down the economy. It's going to go bankrupt. It's a multicultural nation.
No, hang on, mate. They haven't locked down the economy to the extent the UK has. And
really?
bear in mind, but no, they haven't. Nothing like, because it's been on a state-by-state basis.
That's true.
So they haven't done that. And also you have to bear in mind that nations these days just print money. It's what UK's doing. It's what everyone's doing. Because our currencies these days are purely fiat currencies. Nothing backs them. There's nothing to stop the American central bank or the Bank of England, etc., printing as many fucking notes as they want to.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, eventually we may get inflation and all the rest of it, but it's not going to happen immediately. So the idea that like America is going to die in like 10 years is crap. It's not going to.
I'm not saying it's going to completely die, but what I'm saying is it's on a downward spiral. It's not going up anymore.
Okay,
right?
so
China's getting. What I'm just saying, it would be the smart thing to do. I don't think the Chinese are completely stupid. Sit there and wait. The Chinese get richer and richer. America gets poorer and poorer. Wait until you've built up your navy. Wait until you're in a place where you can easily beat America and the rest of the world, and then take Taiwan. I mean, why do something stupid like attack them before you're ready? I just don't see the Chinese.
What's the logic there?
What's the logic?
Well, okay, so if you were Adolf Hitler, you would have sat around and waited until 1990 when the Soviet Union collapsed.
Well, I don't think it was a moron. I don't think.
Yeah, exactly.
Hang on. Listen, I don't think Adolf Hitler was a moron. I think he was I think he was foolish, but I don't think he was a moron.
Well, yeah.
The point I'm trying to make is that, like, leaders of states do things that wouldn't make any sense if they live forever. But no leader of a state lives forever.
Yeah, but I'm not really buying it, because I'm not going to pretend I'm an expert on China, but from my vantage point, they seem to be a very shrewd operator in the way that they work. They're just very busily, very quietly getting on with their business, expanding their tentacles all around the world. If you look at the structure of the Chinese Communist Party, maybe Xi Jinping will eventually be swapped for someone else, but they all of them seem to have this long-term strategic thinking that is absent in Western democracy.
You guys may be right, but I'm not laying money on it. All right, purely on the military and naval side of it, I'm not laying money on it.
This guy in the chat, Bolero, is saying their debt is highest ever in relative and absolute terms. They have to move. I don't see how the debt's going to force them to do it.
Haven't they been building like really large cities in northwestern China to try and get the nomadic populations to settle down because they need the excess workforce?
But they've been
And
failing on
like the cities are just empty.
that. And they've also been failing because of their long time one-child policy as well. Like there's so many more women than men in China.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we spoke about that before, but there is a big demographic problem for China
Yeah.
in the future.
Yeah.
But having said that, even if their population declines by 500 million, there's still going to be 900 million of them, which is 3 times what the US is. So,
And how many of those are peasants who barely scrape a living?
yeah, but the thing about them being peasant means that they've got an enormous amount of growth potential. That's the other way to look at it.
Well, yeah, listen, I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that China could not ignore Taiwan and do other things. I just think that everything we've seen from them in terms of what they do and what they're aiming for and what their armed forces do tells us that that's not going to happen.
What's not going to happen?
That they will ignore Taiwan.
Well, I don't think they will ignore Taiwan. I just think that they're biding their time for when they're strong enough to pull it off.
Well, we'll see.
Why risk everything just for Taiwan? Just sit and wait.
They're not risking everything. You see, this is the point. They're not risking everything. A war against China that the West could win would be a naval and air war. It would see the Chinese Navy mostly destroyed. It would see the Chinese Air Force probably reduced by half, but it wouldn't fundamentally affect China other than that.
Well, hang on. I mean, we'd have an excuse to carpet bomb them.
No. You see, this is not what would happen.
Why not? I would.
No. If you're going to look at a war with China over Taiwan, you've got to think a bigger deal of the Falklands War rather than the Korean War. Don't look at that because that's not going to happen.
It would be an opportunity to deal with them.
We won't win that.
It would be an opportunity to deal with the Chinese competition. I mean, if you beat them in the sea and if you beat them in the air, then you can just drop bombs on all their cities,
I'm not
wipe out their industrial base, and just put them back 20, 30 years.
Yeah, okay. So you might bomb the shit out of Shanghai, for example. Yeah, that might happen. But you're not going to be bombing Beijing.
Why not?
You know? Because of nuclear weapons, for one thing. Like, no country is going to put up with absolutely losing a war these days that's got nuclear weapons. You know, if you were really going to bomb the shit out of London these days, if you were, let's say you were the Russians, for example, and you were determined you were going to absolutely flatten the middle of London. Well, if you do that, St. Petersburg and Moscow are going to get flattened by British nuclear missiles. So you ain't going to do that.
Also, we have to look at the elephant in the room, which we've already touched on, which is that there's an awful lot of Western manufacturing capacity in China. And that means that there's a class of people in our countries who are not going to want that.
Yeah.
You know, well, like I said, I don't think, I'm not thinking about some war to the finish. I'm thinking much more about the sort of wars we used to get in the 19th century. Which had
small skirmishes.
Yeah, like the Crimean War, for example. Not a small skirmish, a big war, but very limited in where it was fought.
Yeah, narrow scope. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing I think is going to happen.
Oh, okay, so this is a really interesting conversation because you've got so much knowledge on this. But so I'm thinking about, so the US military is basically, it's got a footprint all over the globe. If it was engaged with China in the Pacific over Taiwan, what's the capacity and the capability of the US to maintain their positions in Iraq, Afghanistan, and all these other places?
Easy, because that's the army for the most part and the air force, and a war against China would be the navy and the marine.
Right. Okay. So this is just specifically this would be a naval and air battle.
Yep. And maybe,
repel
maybe raids and that kind of stuff with the military.
Right. Okay.
And probably if they were trying to invade Taiwan, you'd have like a US Marine Corps division in Taiwan, and probably Royal Marines as well, I suspect.
So can you walk us through the logistics of what it would take China to actually take Taiwan? What would they have to do to take it? They'd have to land an army there, right?
Yeah, a big army, yeah. And they practice regularly on Hainan, which is another Chinese island.
Right.
All right, really?
And it's not a huge distance. You'd probably have a US and their allied fleet sitting on the far side of Taiwan. And it would depend how much notice you got of the attack. Because once the Chinese get ashore, then you're into a land battle for a while. But the West can win a land battle on Taiwan.
Right.
They can't win a land battle in China. Like, you don't want 2 American and 1 British division on the mainland of China. They'll get destroyed by like 10 Chinese divisions. But on Taiwan, yeah, they can do that. And they can isolate Taiwan from the Chinese. And they can do that by sinking their warships and shooting down their aircraft.
Okay, so, but what about if China doesn't have to invade? What if they can just take it over through subversion and money, basically?
Well, there's no sign of that whatever so far.
Because it's very interesting, because we always like to think that the Chinese are very ethnocentric and they look out for their own and blah, blah. But then you've got this outlier of Taiwan, which is, they're basically completely Chinese.
Yeah, I've spoken to the Franklin, who's actually married to a girl from Taiwan. And they really do not have much in common with the Chinese Communist Party. Like, it was the place where the nationalists went after the Chinese Civil War.
But they are still Chinese, though, right?
They're Chinese, but they're not the Chinese Communist Party.
Well, yeah, come on. I mean, it's the same language and they look the same.
Yeah, but they're not Chinese communists.
Right. So in many ways, it's kind of like Britain and the US, that you get this split, and then you've got 2 political entities that want to be separate from one another.
Yeah, but like I said, the nationalist Chinese who lost the Chinese Civil War went to Taiwan. Chiang Kai-shek's lot, they went to Taiwan. That's the founding of Taiwan. So it's a very different place. And they certainly do not want. And look, you've got to look at the defenses and all the stuff that they do in Taiwan to try and defend themselves against China. It's not something they want, mate. And there is no sign whatsoever so far that the Chinese have been able to infiltrate them with politics and money and all that kind of shit.
Mm.
Like I say, I mean, I've said this for ages. Like, if there's not a war with communist China, a naval and air war, not a land war, a naval and air war, if there isn't one with China over the next 10 years, I will eat my hat.
Okay. Yeah, see, you raise a good point there, because if I was Chinese, that would be the best way to take Taiwan. Just buy it off from the inside. Buy the politicians.
They've tried, but they have no success whatever.
I don't understand why not. I mean, what the hell? They're unbribable?
Well, would you support the communists if they were going to try and take over Britain?
No, but a lot of people would. Jeremy Corbyn would.
Well, hang on a minute.
Sure. Less than you think.
Let's frame this differently. Let's imagine that China is actually 100% Anglo-Saxon, and there's 1.4 billion of us, and then there's little Taiwan with these Anglo-Saxon rebels. What would
are we all communists?
No. Just put it. Just imagine it's Britain for whatever reason. Let's use Ireland as an example, right? Brutus, you want unification with Ireland, so in many ways it's kind of, what's the difference between China and Taiwan?
Yeah, I would try to do it politically.
It's cheaper that way.
It is cheaper. You just pay a political party. You just fund them. They get elected, and then it's boom, the great unification.
Aren't the Chinese doing this with America?
It hasn't worked so far, guys.
Yeah, I don't understand why not. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, it kind
That
of.
would be.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I'm just saying that would be the easy way to do it. So don't understand. I mean, they speak the same language, they look the same, and they used to be the same country. So yeah, why not?
Surely, if Biden's actually in the payroll of the Chinese, this whole thing will probably kick off within the next 4 years.
What, and then deliberately lose it?
Well, no, I mean the Chinese might be if Biden is, China Joe, they might be banking on the fact that he won't support Taiwan.
Is it not the case that there's actually a bill between Taiwan and the US that they're obligated to? So he's kind of bound by the treaty.
Yeah, but I mean he's just writing up executive orders left, right, and centre. I don't think that would really matter anymore. And because he's their guy, the press won't kick up anything about it, and they're the real movers of anything in this sort of scenario.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, guys, let me bring this a bit more home in terms of like Anglo-Saxon Celtic people, for example. New Zealand, under that vile woman that runs New Zealand at the moment, who is a socialist. She's always been a socialist. She supports the Chinese Belt and Road thing. Okay, Australia does not. The one part of Australia that did was dictator Dan Andrews' Victoria, which Dan Andrews is obviously a socialist, of course. And he supported the Chinese Belt and Road, but the Australian federal government, because Australia has a federal system a little bit like America, a little bit. The Australian federal government most certainly doesn't. And at the moment, Australia is in a war of words and to some degree a trade war with China. So it's not just about Taiwan. You've also got to look at Australia. You've also got to look at Japan, which is also like very much under threat from China. Like the Chinese detest Japan.
Yeah, but the thing is that all of these Asian countries hate one another. The South Koreans hate the Japanese hate the South Koreans, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I totally agree with all of that. I've got no problem with any of it. But but what I'm trying to say is that it's not just about Taiwan. Okay, Taiwan might be the immediate trigger, but it's not just about Taiwan.
Yeah. So what is it? Putting aside the rhetoric about the Chinese saying that Taiwan is, part of the motherland and we want to reunite it with the mainland,
which it never was, but
Oh, hang on! I've got the analogy now. It's Australia and Tasmania. It is, because they're about the same size. So I'm just looking at the map right now.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah. Good. Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Well, okay. Australians always say Tasmanians are all born with two heads, but that's just an Australian humour thing.
Yeah. Sorry. So I wanted to touch on is there a strategic importance to Taiwan?
China. For controlling the South China Sea, absolutely there is.
Right. Okay. So is it because I mean, in many ways, because it's Taiwan is almost a proxy for America's control in the region.
And if you take Taiwan, then you put ever increasing pressure on Japan, on South Korea, on the Philippines, and all those nations around them.
Can you bring up a map of China and Taiwan? Because is it that if they then control Taiwan, they can get out into the open oceans unimpeded?
Well, it's not.
No, they've got Shanghai's way up from Taiwan. You've got Hong Kong on the other side.
It's not quite that, but it would certainly put ever increasing pressure on everyone around them. Let me see what I can find here.
Oh, right. So there's a gap. There's quite a big gap between the Philippines and Taiwan. So if they wanted to, I can't pronounce any of these fucking cities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it would if China like controlled Taiwan, it would certainly put greater pressure on everyone else around the area, and particularly Japan, Australia, the Philippines,
Yeah.
but also
Keep
South
expanding.
Korea, South Korea, and even Vietnam, which doesn't much like China these days.
Do you know what? Do you know what's so funny when you look at the map, and you think of China and Australia being neighbours, but they are absolutely thousands of miles apart from one another.
Well,
Not
relatively,
really. Not thousands of miles.
Yeah, it must be if you bring the map up. I mean, I know this is a it's not an accurate map, but it
About
looks like
500 kilometers.
No,
Okay,
it's
well,
surely
fair
more than that, isn't it?
All right, fair enough. Well, okay, all right, fair enough. Yeah,
It's
700.
almost like the Atlantic.
It's
Hang
not
on,
like the bloody
hang on,
Atlantic.
Brian.
What map are you looking at? It's not like the
There we go.
Atlantic.
There we go.
Google,
There we
it's
go.
Google
There we
Maps.
go. There we go, guys. And where you see Papua New Guinea.
Can you get rid of the comment?
Hang on, yeah. Well, I'm not even sure how to do that. But...
Just click on any comment and then click it again, and it will disappear.
Oh, okay. There you go. If you look at Papua New Guinea down on the bottom right,
Yep.
the sticking up bits below Papua New Guinea are Australia.
Yep.
Yeah,
But that's an awfully long way to go.
I think
it isn't that far, mate. Honestly, it really isn't.
I think we should take Papua New Guinea and just keep spreading upwards.
Well, Papua New Guinea used to be part of Australia.
Yeah, absolutely, it did until the 1970s, actually.
Really?
Yeah,
Yeah.
until the 1970s, Papua New Guinea was an Australian colony.
How did you manage to lose that?
Well, they gave it up. I mean, I used to live in the Torres Strait. If you look at that pointy bit, which is Cape York, just below Papua New Guinea, you might be able to see where my cursor is. Just beyond that is the
Thursday Island.
Yeah, Torres Strait Islands, and I used to live up there. I lived up there for like 2.5 years. But
Wow. What was it like?
cute. I used to have a little 15-foot boat. I took it across to Papua New Guinea a couple of times. Like you can sail from Cape York to Papua New Guinea in a 70 horsepower boat in about, I don't know, probably 5 hours, I suppose. 5 hours.
Wow.
So it's
You look at all that land there. That's all green.
yeah,
It's very lush.
It's also all mountains and jungle, but yeah. But yeah, the distances are not as big as you think, guys. They're really not. And if you look down
That's
here,
what I'm saying about you Australians. I mean, you could just go out there and just buy a bit of land and no one would disturb you because it's just totally empty. Look at all this. You got such a great...
yeah, Australia is enormous, mate. It's about the same size as the USA, but it's only got about 22 million people.
Yes.
Sadly, too many of them are Chinese communists. But there we go.
Yeah, does anyone else get seller's remorse when they look at Australia?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, Australia's great. It's just not. But you also have to remember that most of the centre of Australia is either desert or semi-desert. Okay.
I think you need to make Alice Springs the capital because it's right in the middle.
I've been there, mate. Don't do that.
What's wrong with it? Is it no good?
No, it's very pretty. It's a nice little place, but there's also loads of extremely drunk Aboriginals, shall we say? We'll
kick them out.
But no, it's Alice Springs is a nice place in many respects. But I really like Darwin. Northern Territory is great. It's got a bit of it's still got a bit of a frontier feel to it. But like I said,
very humid though.
It's tropical, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, it's tropical.
Nice. Oh, yeah.
Top
that.
end of Australia is tropical, and even like Brisbane, down on the east coast there, is subtropical.
Let's all move to Australia. Just buy a village.
Australia is a great place. I love it. But look, what I'm trying to say when we're looking at this map is that we're not all that far from Taiwan, really.
I need to do a fact check on this. I need to know the distance.
Well, there's probably a scale on the map, Sergio.
There's you can get tools that will measure the distance.
Yeah, they're not that big. I mean, if you look where Singapore is, right, which is here, down at the bottom of Malaysia, to fly from Singapore to Sydney is about 4 hours, I think, as a flight. So it's not long.
Yeah, but that's like me flying from London to Cyprus.
Yeah. So it's not enormous distances at all. In terms of like modern jet fighter aircraft and missiles and ships that move at 30 knots and all this kind of stuff, it's not that far at all.
Yep.
And like China is trying to take over this area. This is Hainan here, where they practice invading Taiwan. Right, that big island there is Hainan. Taiwan was never Chinese, like it was Japanese for donkey's years. Here's Japan up here. There's the Philippines. You've got Vietnam down here. India, who is not very fond of China because they have clashes on the border up here. It's there's a lot going on. Okay, and also China is ever expanding its influence over here on the east coast of Africa. So, and here's all our oil routes around here. So, you know.
We can't see because we can't see your mouse.
Oh, okay. You can't see my mouse. Sorry, I beg your pardon. But anyway, if you look, you can see all that stuff on that map.
So I've done a distance check from Hong Kong to Victoria.
Yeah.
And it's 4,685 miles.
All right.
As the bird flies.
Right. Do one to Darwin. Hong Kong to Darwin.
Yeah, that's going to be obviously a lot. That's
a lot closer. Yeah. Probably less than half the distance, I guess.
2,800. Call it 2,900 miles.
There you go. So it's not very far at all.
Yeah. So it's interesting if you think about the logistics of invading Australia. You'd have to go. I mean, I think it's impossible. I mean, yeah, you might be able to get to Australia, but then how the logistics of going all the way through northern...
The Chinese can't do it at the moment. No, absolutely not. Like, listen, the Australian Defence Forces have been armed and equipped for a long time now to fight against Indonesia, basically.
Uh-huh.
If Indonesia wanted to start a war with with Australia, Australia could beat them. Like our air forces would knock the shit out of them, so would the Navy, and the few survivors would get mopped up by the Australian Army. But they're the only people who Australia might realistically get in a war with on their own is Indonesia. Like anyone else, they're going to have allies, and in terms of Australia's hopes, that'll be the Americans mainly. Which is why Australia, like Britain, supports most American wars. So that's a different story. China couldn't invade Australia at the moment. They're not capable of it. But if they took Taiwan, then they would be in a position to try and produce some sort of blue water navy that would require like fleet oilers and fleet supply ships that could keep up with the frigates and destroyers and carriers and resupply them.
They don't really need to invade, though, do they? I mean, they're just buying it up anyway, aren't they?
No, they're not. That's what I keep telling you. They're not. I don't know why you guys keep saying they're doing that. The Taiwanese are not letting them do that.
No. I'm talking about Australia.
Oh,
I mean,
Chinese... They're trying to do that for sure. But at the moment, like Australia for a long time was basically China's open cast mine for all the minerals and shit that they wanted. It isn't anymore. We're now in the middle of a trade war with China.
Yeah, they've the exports to China have dropped like 50%, haven't they?
Yeah, and the Australian government is actually not exporting some things to China that China wants, which is why it's happened. So at the moment, we're in a bit of a war of words, which I hope continues because it will lead to a stronger Australian Navy, for one thing.
But the main thing is getting the Chinese out of Australia, the immigrants, all of these the espionage agents who are stealing intellectual property. You need to get those out.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I'd go back to what you've often said, Sojo, is that removing people from a country is extremely problematic, to use a word that I don't like very much.
Yeah.
So, I'd go back to that, to be honest. I mean, like, the thing is that what the Chinese don't do is they don't tend to create rape gangs that target schoolgirls. They don't tend to commit large numbers of armed robberies or stabbings and this kind of stuff. So it's even more difficult to get rid of those guys than it is some of the people in the UK.
So where does India fit into all of this?
Well, India is anti-Chinese, obviously, anti-Pakistan, who is more pro-Chinese, and also India has been building up its naval forces and has become increasingly pro-Western. So you'll get Indian Air Force guys doing exercises with the RAF. We've had Indian warships doing exercises with the Australians, and it's an anti-Chinese thing, basically.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I look at this and think to myself, there's a good opportunity here for our defence industry to sell a shitload of arms to India, Australia,
Well,
Japanese.
actually, with Australia's already buying the Type 26 British design frigate, as are the Canadians, and the New Zealanders would if they didn't have a socialist feminist twat as prime minister. The Australians already have some British design ships. They have a lot of American design ships as well, of course. India tends to buy from the Russians purely because the Russians are cheaper for the most part. But the Indians have also bought Raphael fighters from the French as well, I believe.
Okay.
So, but all of these nations around China can see the threat. And like I said, if it came to a war, it would definitely be the Americans. It would definitely be the Australians. I think it would almost definitely be the Japanese. And I think it would definitely be the Brits, because I know for a fact the Royal Navy's been training for this for years now. So, it's the main place they think they're going to see action next.
Okay. So what about playing devil's advocate now? What do you think about the idea that having a stronger China actually might be better for us, in the sense that, if the US isn't top dog, then, what about the possibility that there's less of this sort of like imperial globo homo?
Nah, don't agree at all. I think the way to go then would be, let's go back to a world where there are various power centers, and we should be one of them.
I think I'm gonna have to leave it there. I'm gonna have to hop off.
No worries, Eamon. Nice for you to come on, mate.
Yeah. All right. Talk to you
See
later.
you, mate.
Go well. So yeah, I mean, I think if America is going to fall from power, and I don't think that's going to happen in the next 10 or even in the next 20 years, to be honest, unless she allows China to invade Taiwan, and then it will happen very quickly. If that doesn't happen, then let's go to a world where there are multiple power centers, and let's make Britain, and maybe even Britain allied with Canada and Australia and perhaps New Zealand, another one. That's what I'd like to see.
Yeah, but is there really any power there? It's very dispersed. It's not concentrated.
It doesn't need to be concentrated in the modern world. I mean,
but it would be spread thin, wouldn't it?
One of the things. Why would it be spread thin? It depends what your forces are and where you put them.
Well, because I mean that it's spread thin geographically. It's spread all over the globe. It's spread in Europe, North America, and Australasia. That is, it's spread thin.
But why does it? Well, my point is, if you've got like a global navy, like the Royal Navy, the reason the Royal Navy is still a very serious navy in the world is that all of it can go in just about anywhere in the world and operate because it has enough support and supply ships to do that. Just about. Okay. If you have a Royal Navy, a Royal Australian Navy, and a Royal Canadian Navy that can do that, they can concentrate anywhere they want. This is my point.
So what does, if we add up the military budgets of the UK, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, what do you think it comes to?
It would come to higher than everybody apart from America, Russia, and China.
Oh, I need to.
Just,
I'm gonna look this up.
just because the British budget is higher than everyone apart from America, Russia, and China.
Let's have a look. So $50 billion for the UK, 27 for Australia, 22 for Canada. Call it $100 billion.
Yep, sounds about right.
Which would put the UK, which would put that group third.
Yeah.
Above India by 30 billion.
Yeah, that's what I said. Yeah, like I said, it would make us the third or fourth most powerful, and it wouldn't make much difference because the third and fourth are quite close to each other anyway. So yeah, it would make them a very, very serious military power, particularly if they concentrated on the Navy and the Air Force as opposed to having a great big massive army, which there wouldn't be much point in having. Like you can get away with a relatively minimal army, as Britain always traditionally did. So we're getting back to our 37 routes, you see. Excuse me a moment, guys. I've just got to let my little dog out.
Okay.
What's going on, Sergio? What are we talking about? I'm just reading Telegram.
I was going to ask you, have you, because I told you about GameStop and stonks.
Yeah.
Did you have a look at what was going on?
Yeah. So everyone's talking about it. Yeah.
It's great, isn't it? What do you make of it all?
Well, I hope they hold. I mean, I'm struggling to understand how it can lead to like hedge funds losing 70 billion, which is a number which I saw floating around. I mean, I'm struggling. Wow. Yeah, I mean, I'm struggling to understand that, but I mean, I get what they're doing, but I hope they hold and they sell at 1,000, which is what a lot of them are saying they're going to do. But yeah, it's obvious the establishments come down on them. They close down the subreddit. They
and the Discord.
Sorry,
and the Discord as well,
and the Discord. And Robinhood, which I think is what a lot of them were trading on, that's stopped anybody from buying. Surely it must be illegal, and surely there has to be some kind of class action, but I don't know.
Yeah,
but it's a great way for left and right to unite, because everyone hates the banks.
Yeah,
and everyone hates Wall Street. I mean, this is what the left wing used to be about. It used to be about Occupy Wall Street, didn't it? So
yeah. Well, that's what I said at the start, that it's like you had Occupy Wall Street version 1, which was on the streets and really achieved nothing. And then the nerds have decided, oh, actually, let's have version 2 and actually hit them where it hurts.
I don't think Occupy Wall Street completely achieved nothing, because it did wake a lot of people up. I mean, there had to be some reaction, and it did kind of spread that meme of the 1% and the 99%.
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't want to like completely dismiss it as a movement. Obviously, it was a left-wing movement, and it got a little bit grubby at the end with just like a bunch of hippies just taking drugs and raping each other. But well, that's kind of what it turned into. But you know, yeah. I mean, I think it was a good. I remember being really excited about it back in 2010, wherever it was. But yeah, great news, great story. Yeah, GameStop, fantastic.
Yeah, I hope they because there's still a lot of outstanding short interest in stock still. So if they can keep driving the price up, if there are hedge funds that are still short, or there are new hedge funds short, another short squeeze can put those ones out of business as well.
Well, I think Robinhood's stopped them down, but I guess they can buy the stock from another platform, I suppose.
Yeah, so if you can get onto another broker that isn't, restricting the trading, then yeah, it's all game is on. But
so it's an opportunity for a broker to make some money, right?
Yeah. So there was a company called Webull, Webull, as in bull market.
Right.
They said that they were trying to get people to move over to their platform because they said that they didn't have any restrictions. Yeah, so it's like this game of cat and mouse of opening accounts and getting it funded and trying to get in on the action.
Yeah. No, I've never bought stock before, but I mean, I wouldn't mind throwing just 20 quid at it, just to piss off Wall Street. I mean, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Isn't it? You know what I mean? Like, why not?
Yeah.
What is the price of it at the moment?
I think it closed at 350.
Oh, geez. So you could, people are saying they want to drive it to 1,000, and that seems to be like the target in people's mind. So you could triple your money.
To me, the important thing is, will they do it with something else? It's all well and good doing this with GameStop, but can they do it with another product or another company?
Yeah, they did it. They did it with a number of stocks actually. So there was one called COS, which makes jeans. There's another one called AMC, which is the movie theater company. They were trying to do a short squeeze in silver, which got a bit of traction.
That could be interesting. I'd like to see.
Yeah, so there's like multiple fronts opening up from this.
Right.
Cool.
Well, what they're going to need is a social media platform that they're not going to get kicked off.
Yep.
So, I mean, if people are making money out of this, maybe they can build their own. I don't know. I mean, there's definitely an opportunity there for somebody to build some kind. I mean, you've got Voat, VOAT. That appeared as an alternative to Reddit. That kind of popped up around about the time that Pizzagate spread, because the Pizzagate subreddit got kicked off and a lot of people moved to Voat. But I mean, I looked at it a few times. Maybe they could use that. I don't know, but there needs to be a social media platform where people can organize.
Is that the Russian one, Voat?
I don't think it's Russian. No, it's American.
There's one called VK. I know
that's a Russian Facebook.
Oh, right. Okay. Right.
Well, it says was. Oh, is it closed down now? Oh, the site shut down on December 25th, 2020. Well, fuck me.
I'll be interested, guys, to see what Radical Liberation and his economic channel has to say about this the next time it comes on.
Oh, this is really sad. Look, on December 22nd, 2020, Voat again announced it would be shut down due to lack of funding. Co-founder and CEO Chastian said that he had been funding the site himself after a key investor defaulted on their contract in March, but had run out of money by December. Oh, they just missed the boat. I mean, that would have been
perfect.
Yeah.
Maybe. I still say people who are interested in free speech online should go and look at minds.com. Like, Minds is pretty good for that. I've been on Minds for ages, like years, and it really is pretty good for free speech.
That was a big thing when the whole Sargon thing was kicking off, and it sort of never really went anywhere.
It is
on Minds. Sargon's still there. What's his name? The Irish guy, Computing Forever. He's on Minds. But Minds is still very good for free speech. You can, if you're not calling for direct violence, obviously, you can pretty much say what you like on Minds and you will not get censored. So I absolutely recommend Minds to people who want a free speech platform to talk on and to put videos on and this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I did join it years ago. I mean, the whole thing with the social media is just so It's just so. You join one, and then you join another one, and then it's just become such a drag.
Yeah, it's cumbersome, isn't it? You just want, I want one login and one interface that, that connects with all of them.
Well,
Yeah.
I use Minds for the most part. I'm getting on for 4,200 subs on there, I think now. I use Minds mostly. I use Gab. Obviously, I use YouTube. I think I'm going to start using BitChute, to be honest, but I'm not sure about that because that's coming under pressure. It's coming under pressure.
Here would be an idea. All these old social media platforms, if they could all get together so that there's only one login. Do you know what I mean? Like you have
federated. Yeah.
But that would make it very vulnerable immediately, I think.
Why?
To take over by like big tech.
Why?
Well, just because you're using one login for a start. I mean, who's going to hold that would be secure?
Well, you need some. I don't know. You'd need some. Figure out some kind of agreement.
I know
maybe
you're a much bigger expert than me on this kind of stuff, but
I'm just saying this is what big tech does. I mean, you just if you're logged into your Google account, you can use it to log into all kinds of websites or all kinds of websites. You go there and they say, do you want to log in with your Facebook account or whatever, blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, I think old tech needs to go in the same direction because I can't be bothered to type out my flipping name and a fake name and a fake phone number and blah, blah, blah. I can't be, get the chip, get the SIM, put it in my phone. You need one.
It's what they depend on, though, isn't it? The people are too lazy to do that stuff.
Yeah, so you need for all these alternative social media platforms that are popping up, they need some kind of federation where you log into one and then you log into all of them, and then it'll be much easier to move between them.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe. I mean, I don't know about the technical feasibility of this, but if you could have like a sort of distributed blockchain-based federated authentication system, then it wouldn't be vulnerable to any one power.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
All right, guys, we're coming up for 4 hours in 4 minutes, so I reckon what we will do is final thoughts. Brutus?
My final thought is I'm going to do a live stream tomorrow, and so people should come and watch that.
Sergio?
I second that. I mean, I don't really have anything else to remark on. It's been a good 4 hours. I've really enjoyed it. I like covering all these different topics. It's good. It beats the grind of talking about migration and rape gangs.
Yeah, you can't always talk about the same thing. Look, my final thing is going to be this, and it's going to be an appeal to people who are watching this. If you are an Australian or a Canadian or a New Zealander, I really, really want to do an old Commonwealth stream in the next couple of weeks.
I got a guy for you on my Telegram group.
Thank you. Send me an email, Brutus, if you would, or get hold of me on Discord or something like that. Guys, if you're an Australian, Canadian, New Zealander, and you're right of centre, I'm not really interested if you're a left-wing ass. But if you're right of centre, then please get hold of me because I am looking to get an old Commonwealth stream together. And if it goes well, I'd like to do one every month to kind of complement these streams that are mostly about UK. So that's the end of my stuff. Sojo, Brutus, Armin when he was on here, and Adamant, of course. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And have a good week, guys, and we'll see you next week.
Good night.
Good night.